let's not forget that someone does need to get the door. I'm going to have to skip.
And you can only imagine that sound must mean that it has just gone midday. It is Sunday, and it is the 14th of July 2019. Of course, there's a rather important game of cricket going on. There's a rather important game of tennis going on. But above all of that, it is Men's Radio Station coming to you live from Covent Garden. And just in case you're thinking, my goodness me, Russ, you do sound different this week. Well, fear not, you're not going completely off the kilter. Russ is taking a very well-earned week off. In fact, it's a social occasion that has been in his diary for a good few months, and as a result of it, he has abandoned ship this week and left yours truly, Phil Dave, with you until 3 o'clock this afternoon. But you'll be absolutely delighted to hear that I am by no stretch of the imagination alone. Oh dear, oh no, definitely not. We have a rather busy studio, and I shall introduce one by one who we have in the studio already, never mind the guests who are going to join us a little later on. Rocking the desk, pushing all of the buttons, and about to do his famous Usain Bolt pose. Yes, we have the boy wonder producer, who is Mr. James Blake. Hello, James.
Hello, Phil. Good afternoon. Thank you for the
very good
amazing intro.
Excellent. There you go. I'm just looking at a delayed, beg your pardon, that's a bagel coming up to haunt me. A delayed image of you on Facebook, and all we can see is your finger pointing.
That's all you ever need to see is the finger.
There we go. We can only see the finger. But we are by no stretch the only ones. Oh no, it gets better than that. We are also joined by the goddess of the green room. Yes, her ladyship is in the studio today. We have Mrs. Blake, or Lady B, as we like to call her. Good afternoon, Lady B.
Thank you for inviting me.
Nice and near the microphone. There we go.
Thank you for inviting
There we go.
me.
I'm very pleased you're relaxed and that you're in a chilled environment, but you do need to be near the microphone so we can hear you. There we go. So, but there we have it. Isn't that nice? This is live radio at its finest. Whilst you're settling into the microphone, last but by absolutely no means least, he is Mr. Social Media. He is about to abandon us for a whole month, and we're traumatised at the thought of this. But we are also joined by Dennis Relojo-Howell. A very good afternoon to you, Dennis.
I know my name is a mouthful, but you've got it right. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, what can I say? It's apparently I can take it. Anyway, right. Well, what have we got coming up on today's show? That's what I hear you cry, and a very good cry it is as well. We have got, I'm really not just saying this, I think we say this more often than not each week here on Men's Radio Station, where we always say that we've got a fascinating lineup for you. But I actually believe we really have got a fascinating lineup. Oh, by the way, I need to get this out of the way. I've got man flu. I'm really sorry. I'm going to try not to breathe on anybody. I do apologise, but if I sound a bit sniffly and a bit gross, I can only apologise in advance. It came about on Friday. I couldn't believe what I was experiencing because I don't normally get summer colds. In the winter, I have my share. Believe me, in the wintertime, it's almost as if I'm selfish when it comes to the colds that I get. But alas, no, I managed to even pick one up in the summertime as well. It serves me right for travelling with all the great unwashed on the public transport. But anyway, on today's programme, we are going to be talking about the somewhat serious subject of addiction. Now, what do we mean when we say addiction? Well, I think that's going to be one of the questions we're going to ask. What do we mean when we say addiction? Is addiction subjective? Now, we can't necessarily answer that ourselves, but hopefully our amazing guests can answer it. We have John Paul Davis, who is a psychotherapist and a counsellor, and he will be joining us to talk about addiction, amongst many other things that he helps people with. He's actually got a very, very impressive list of different conditions and problems that he helps people, and he specializes in working with difficulties such as anxiety, stress management, depression, addiction, as we've already discussed, compulsions, codependence, lack of meaning and purpose, narcissism, and issues around sex and sexuality. So he covers low self-esteem as well. He covers an array of different issues that affect so many people, and I suppose that they're the kind of conditions that people just take for granted, that we have them, that we don't necessarily think about how it affects others in a day-to-day scenario. So if any of those subjects ring true with you and you think to yourself, do you know what, I do suffer with a bit with stress and I don't know how to manage it. I do have an addiction, because obviously, as I've said, the main subject for today is addiction. Or if it's even something along the lines of low self-esteem, then please do get in contact, because genuinely I believe that John Paul will be able to help you with this. And we'd love to hear your calls more than anything. You don't have to give your real name. If you would like to remain anonymous, you can. You can call us on 0203 290 4411. That's 0203 290 4411. Do not look at me like that, because I do not want that revolting jingle being played.
Are you sure you don't want the jingle played?
I do not want that jingle.
Are you sure?
And I know Russ will be going ballistic with me as he listens to that, saying, you know, David, the one who created them, will be listening to this. He'll be most offended. David, I am sure you are an incredibly nice individual. I have great admiration for the time and the effort that has clearly gone into making the jingle sound so terrible. But at the same time, I'm afraid it's just not for me. I'm very sorry. I really do apologise. But 0203 290 4411. You can also contact us via Facebook. Go to facebook.com/mensradiostn. And on Twitter and on Instagram, we are at Men's Radio STN. We're also going to be joined by Jonathan Prince, MBE noch. Now, Jonathan Prince, MBE, is founding trustee of the Blue Ribbon Foundation. Now, I am just as curious as you are to know what the Blue Ribbon Foundation is. We are all aware, I believe, of pink ribbons, which of course symbolises the campaign for breast cancer awareness. We're also very aware of the red ribbon, which of course is to do a lot with the AIDS charities. But the Blue Ribbon Foundation, not so sure I'm aware of this, so it'd be very interesting to hear what that is all about. And we will do a little later on. And last but by absolutely no means least, we are joined by a truly remarkable individual. We are going to be joined by the person who is probably best qualified, I would argue, in the world to talk about addiction. We're going to be speaking to David Charkham. Now, David Charkham is an actor, but he's also probably most known for being the recovery coach who helped Ozzy Osbourne. Now, just let that sink in, seriously, because if anyone has openly and honestly said that they have struggled with addiction, then I think it's fair to say that Ozzy Osbourne has been incredibly public and incredibly brave about what he has said he has been through when it comes to addiction. And we're going to be speaking to the man who helped Ozzy through his darkest times. David Charkham will be joining us live here on Men's Radio Station a little later on. So that's who we've got coming up. That's what we've got coming up. All we need now is you. 0203 290 4411. That's the telephone number. We would absolutely love if you were to get involved. Now, I appreciate such a big subject is not something that one wants to be open about necessarily, because admitting that one has an addiction is more often than not the first in a massive step in a road to recovery. So if you are unprepared to admit it to yourself, you're not very likely going to admit it to us. But maybe you have been having feelings recently that makes you think that perhaps, just maybe, you do have something in the way of an addiction. And it could be anything. It could be whatever you believe you are addicted to, whatever you have a problem with. This is the place to discuss it. You'll get no judgment here. That's not what Men's Radio Station is about. In fact, the main reason it was set up by Russ and by Howard Jameson's, our founding fathers, shall we say, that's what we'll call them, the founding fathers of Men's Radio Station, was designed literally for people to be able, for men to be able to talk without fear of judgment, and just knowing that you are not going through what you go through alone. There are people all over the world who have the same conditions, who have the same anxiety, and who have the same problems, but they don't necessarily know where to go to share those problems. Well, Men's Radio Station is a great place to start. And I would love to think that you could be daring enough, that you could be brave enough to do that this afternoon. 0203 290 4411 on Facebook, facebook.com/Men's Radio STN, and on Twitter and Instagram, it's at Men's Radio STN. Okay, before all of that, we are going to turn our attentions to a slightly different subject, and this is something that producer James has found online, and it's a story about body image. Now, I have to confess that I have not necessarily seen the story, so producer James, would you care to explain to us what your findings are and why we'll be talking about the subject of body image?
Well, this morning, whilst I was browsing the various news outlets of the world, I came across an interesting story which was talking about how hookup apps, as I believe they're called, made someone want the perfect body image.
Now, can we just establish hookup apps, things along the lines of Tinder and all of those sorts, and J-Swipe for the Northwest London world amongst us. So the ones where...
Wonder where you're from.
So it's the ones where, in other words, that you use applications to meet up with other people, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And this was specifically a gay guy, I believe, talking about it. So I think the one he's in reference to is Grindr, is the one. But he was just talking about on the app, it was a great way to meet new people and find like-minded people outside of my own network of friends. However, he said there was lots of judgment, and it eventually led him to constantly looking in the mirror and start to, pick apart slowly his every little nuance of his body. And then I'm guessing it turned into an addiction where he ended up being in the gym, going to different beautician places, and basically just trying to achieve what he would consider the perfect look. So I thought it tied in kind of well with what we're talking about today.
I would agree wholeheartedly. Thank you very much indeed for giving us the backstory. Now, of course, the question is, on the subject of the perfect body image, how does one actually define the perfect body image? Because what might be perfect to you is not necessarily perfect to everybody else. Dennis, you are obviously Mr. Social Media. You are always trawling through the online world and the Twitter sphere and the Facebook sphere and all of those different types of places. And of course, that's one medium, one platform where people often associate those sorts of, I suppose, issues to start rising from, because people see all of these immaculate looking individuals on Twitter, at Mr. Phil Dave, thank you, and all of the time, as a result of it, people think, oh, maybe that's what I should look like. And I don't mean me, by the way, I'm really not that vain, but people do look online and they think to themselves, well, I can see that this person has some sort of six-pack going on. They're all really hench. They're really sort of defined individuals. That's just men. And then obviously with women as well, they're beach body ready and all of this malarkey. Do you think that we have a problem in society with body image?
I think fundamentally we do have a problem with body image. In essence, this is actually being perpetuated by platforms like hookup apps and obviously the social media. But also we have to bear in mind that these platforms are actually very visceral platforms in the sense that this is based on looks. So we have to realize that people who actually use these hookup apps and the social media, they're looking at images. So you have, if you're using that platform, fundamentally, you have to put your best image. But obviously we don't just have to put the blame on those social media platforms, but also on people who are actually using this platform. Why do they actually feel less self-confident about their body image? And it's not just limited to social media or those I don't know what you call them, hookup apps.
Hookup applications, yeah.
As a mental health blogger, I could also say there's also a number of blogs which actually perpetuate those body image problems, such as we call them pro-Ana and pro-Mia websites.
What's that, pro-Ana and pro-Mia?
These are websites that promotes being anorexic and being bulimic.
Really?
Hang on a second. So they actually promote it as being a good thing?
Yes.
Wow.
And there's also on YouTube, there's what you would call video bloggers who actually promote OMAD, like this is 1 meal a day. So it's not just on social media apps, but they're widespread.
So you see, I find myself quite uncultured for even knowing, or not knowing as the case may be, that those sort of websites even exist. I had absolutely no idea. And I guess, Lady B, yourself, being of the female persuasion, do you believe that there is more pressure on women than men, or do you think in this day and age that the pressure may be getting kind of equal?
It's equal. Also, you mirror what you see, and because of it's very easy now to get plastic surgery, so you can have that body. You can, if you're watching, and you will mirror the image that you see. And of course, men now, because they have, why shouldn't they? They have salons for men where they can go and have their facials and their manicures. But when you're actually perhaps on Grindr or the other things, you're searching for something. You're searching for, as you say, you're going to put the best that you can be. So you're going to mirror what you see. If you see someone, you think, well, I might have the frame, I could attain that by liposuction plastic surgery, then that's what I've understood is happening. And when you talk about the websites for the anorexia and so on, I think one of the reasons that this radio station was set up, because they also have the suicide websites, which I've never...
Do they?
Oh, yes.
Well,
the person will say they're going to commit suicide with you, and they will talk you right through it till the end, but then they don't do it.
It's absolutely unbelievable. I had absolutely no idea that these things existed. Now, maybe that's because I don't use the internet in a way that maybe a lot of people do in this day and age. But at the same time, I guess that it's because I'm lucky enough to say I've never had such thoughts even go through my mind. A lot of people would obviously, if they do find themselves in a certain situation where perhaps they have thoughts along those lines, maybe do some sort of search and then stumble across websites that are there to, in inverted commas, help them, then obviously that's when they're going to discover it, and they are going to start, dare I say, attempting to carry out some of the most, dreadful things that you could even begin to think of carrying out. But I'm shocked because I had really, genuinely no idea that these sort of things even existed.
Seems like the internet's a place of wonder and also darkness, because it's got great resources, but at the same time, it seems like it can be hurting people. Now, my question is, would it be almost an addiction?
Yes,
body image and stuff like that.
We go back to the. Well, yes, because as it's been said for a long time, plastic surgery is addictive in itself. Once you start it, you're going to want a bit more and tweak it a bit more.
Yeah, you're never going to be happy, are you?
Well, no, because if it's an addiction, then the addictive side of it cannot be sated. Addiction is a spiritual disease, and you're never going to be. When you're addicted to something, you're living on the outside, so you can only cure it by living on the inside.
But wouldn't that be why we go to psychotherapists, counsellors, etc., to help us cure the inside?
Yes, to be prepared to have what they call it a spiritual awakening, because you cannot be cured of an addiction because by the outside, because you're just going to pick up another addiction. You can only cure it by inner work and by finding inner peace of mind, soul contentment.
I think that's the cure for a lot of things.
The problem is, though, that surely the problem is with contentment is that one can only be content when one learns to accept the way they are and who they are. And also often, because of all of this exposure, I believe anyway, and I'm absolutely no expert on this at all, so please don't take my word, this is just my observation, is that if there is so much exposure to people who look a certain way, who appear to be the epitome of perfection, and people don't see themselves in that perfection, therefore start to pull themselves apart, then I would imagine that the problem is that people are never going to be content. So then begs the question, do people in media in particular, and in the public eye, have an obligation, or those I should say who are responsible for the public eye, do they have an obligation to start introducing people who are a little more like the average Joe. So in other words, someone who maybe doesn't have that six-pack, who doesn't have the bulging biceps, who doesn't have the perfect physique, because actually it just demonstrates, you know what? We are all different, and we're all sort of made in the image of who we're meant to be. And okay, we can change some of these things, but we don't necessarily have to.
I agree with what you're saying there, whereas we do need to start showing a larger variety of body types and body images, but I think we're starting to see it anyway. Just this morning on the tube, I saw an advert for, I don't know if this is the right term, plus size models, I think it was.
Yeah.
You know, where they're, they're not very skinny women like a twig, they're a bit more natural looking, dare I say. So I think we are starting to see a slight change into it, but the question is, will that help people? I don't know, because I still think people are obsessed with certain looks, aren't they?
Absolutely they are, but that's because you could argue that we've bred an entire generation or two generations to be obsessed with it. When the concept of plastic surgery on the NHS was introduced, and I don't even know off the top of my head when that was, but I know it's been around for a fair old amount of time. That is, by it being on the NHS, is arguably saying society accepts that people want to pull themselves apart, and not necessarily for the right reasons.
I don't think it was introduced on the NHS for cosmetic reasons. I think it was introduced...
No, but people do use it for, and it's important to stress that, of course, it's not necessarily for the reasons that people use it for, but it's almost as if someone is... For example, you hear these horror stories about how...
Sorry to interrupt. Can you get cosmetic plastic surgery through the NHS?
No, I need to triple check. I need to triple check this, but I am fairly sure that I have seen, there was a story recently of someone who had about £70,000 worth of cosmetic surgery done on the NHS, and it definitely made national news, I'm sure. But it was...
I do remember reading a story of something similar. However,
yeah. It's not that difficult. They will do it for mental health reasons. They will give you, but talking about this aesthetically pleasing to the eye, this goes back to the Greeks, to the goddesses, and it's not just around now. It's just that because the social media, you can assess it quickly. This has always been around to want to be aesthetically pleasing to the eye.
But it's maybe not been as in your face as it has been.
Because,
I think it's been more amplified
because of the tool of the social media.
I definitely agree. I think it has been more amplified, and I think especially with the introduction of lots of reality TV shows and social media, where people are very much based on...
There's nothing wrong with having a tweak or what, but it's the addiction. It's the addictive part of your... okay, we can talk about Michael Jackson. Am I allowed to say that? I mean, look where he went with that.
I don't think he's going to sue us if that's what you're worried about.
You never know.
I'm never sure. But look what happened. Look where he went.
Well, it wasn't... Look, I'm a big Michael Jackson fan.
I love him too.
I love his music. I don't know about the person, but didn't he suffer from I can't think of the name of it, mito something?
It was some sort of skin condition that he did suffer with.
And they say he got burnt and so on, but if you watch the documentaries, you will see that is your classic case of it, isn't it? Of wanting...
Look, I think it's very easy to pick apart one individual and say, look, okay, well, there's clearly someone who's had a lot of work done and therefore in the public eye setting a bad example. If it is done for legitimate reasons, which who are we to question whether or not the reasons are legitimate or not, then I don't think anyone would argue against it.
No, but I'm saying you can see that's a classic case of addiction. And not that it's right or wrong, but it's it's a body dysmorphia as well, that you're looking and you're seeing something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, people being addicted to things such as plastic surgery, I hate the word things, but you know what I mean. If someone is addicted to cosmetic surgery because they believe it's the only way they can strive towards perfection, whatever perfection is, then you can almost understand why people go down that path. What I worry about is that as soon as you are, say, for example, the person's physician, the person's doctor, maybe the person's family, whoever it is, the person around or the people around that individual who is quite addicted, for want of a better term, to trying to strive towards the perfect look, what kind of obligation falls on them to try and do something? Because, of course, it's more often than not said that an addict has to either A, admit there is a problem, or B, want to get help. And if you don't have either of those two factors, well, then you could be speaking until the cows come home, and you're still not going to get through to that individual. So then it starts begging the question is, do you have to force through something by saying, look, well, hang on a second, you've already had this done, you've already had that done, no more, you can't have any more done, it's not good for you, it's not right, you're actually just pandering to the one of the lowest, should we say, the lowest problems in society, and that is something as simple as the way you look. You look the way you are, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with it.
If you're not comfortable with the way...
They can't hear that. They won't be able to... Someone in the suffering, they will not be able to hear anyone close to them. That's why they would have an intervention or so on and so forth.
But what happened when that intervention didn't exist? Now, I know that's hypothetical because I know the interventions do exist now. But years ago, let's say way before cosmetic surgery ever came to the forefront, up until that point, the best people could hope for was a new hairdo. Seriously. And that's what I don't understand. So why now, just because those interventions exist, doesn't necessarily mean it a good thing or not. You know, cigarettes exist. It doesn't make it a good thing. So what I'm trying to get at is that sort of where has society gone wrong that it's okay to be that obsessed with one's body image?
But we're talking about addiction, aren't we? No one's saying it's okay. We're talking about an addiction. And if that is your addiction and you're in the midst of it, then it's very, very, very difficult.
But a person will only ever be addicted to something that's readily available, or something that they can get their hands on. If there was a total, I'm not saying there would be a blanket ban on cosmetic surgery, of course there wouldn't, but there are talks that the government are going to introduce a blanket ban on cigarettes. So okay, there will be some people who say, oh well, they'll just get them underground then, or they'll stock up for years to come, and they will never get rid of them altogether. But the bottom line is that if something is not available, then it will be that someone will try and access it, someone will try and do something with it. Anyway, it'd be fascinating to hear your thoughts on it. You know, this is all, of course, a conversation that is all great and well and good between the four of us, but it's not the same without you. So if you would like to get involved, please do get in contact with us. We would love to hear from you. Telephone number hasn't changed since I last mentioned it. It is 0203 290 4411. That's 0203 290 4411. You can always get in contact with us as well through our social media places. Social media, you go to facebook.com/Men's Radio STN, or on Facebook, on Twitter even I should say, or on Instagram we are at Men's Radio STN. Loads of ways to get in contact, absolutely no excuse. Please do join the conversation, we would love to hear from you. Right, coming up after this ad break, we will be speaking to our very first guest, John Paul Davis, who is a psychotherapist and a counsellor, will be live in the Men's Radio Station studio. Do not go anywhere, you're listening to Men's Radio Station.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Your call is important to us. You are now number 15 in a queue.
At Profile Insurance Services, we treat people as individuals. You'll speak to a real person, not a call centre. We're fast, small, independent, and have a superb team of insurance specialists. And they're really nice too. Advice is totally free and we cover everything. Call 0208 931 3306. Listeners to Men's Radio Station won't pay a penny for admin fees. That's 0208 931 3306. With Profile Insurance Services, you're covered.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Let me tell you about Jermyn Street Theatre. We are the smallest theatre in the West End, only 70 seats. We are a registered charity and not grant-aided, run by a small team of volunteers and trustees. Jermyn Street Theatre is a hidden gem. It combines the comfort and convenience of the West End with the intimacy of a studio. Every seat has a perfect view of the stage, and even a whisper is audible. This is a secret theatre in the heart of the West End, once found, never forgotten.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Davis. I'm the proud owner of Stoughton Cigars in Mayfair and Knightsbridge. For the past 60 years, we've been providing the world's best Cuban cigars. When it comes to cigars, there's no other than Stoughton Cigars from Mayfair and Knightsbridge. We at Stoughton's would like to wish Men's Radio Station every support in their task for helping men's emotional and mental well-being. Check them out. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Indeed, we really do talk here at Men's Radio Station. It has just gone at 12:30. Where have you been for the last half an hour? But thank you very much indeed for tuning in all the same. It's very much appreciated. This is Phil Dave sitting in for the legend that is Mr. Russ Kane. Don't worry, you've not gone completely balmy. Your ears are not playing tricks on you. Yes, it is me, and I'm sitting alongside the wonder that is boy wonder producer, Mr. James Blake, who is over there rocking at the desk.
I'm the finger that you see on the stream.
You are the finger on the stream. I think that is the way that will actually be, I think, on your title now on Twitter, the finger on the stream.
The finger on the
Perfect. Okay, we also have Dennis Relojo-Howell in the studio as well. He's Mr. Social Media here at Men's Radio Station. And last but by absolutely no means least, we are still honoured and joined in the studio by the goddess of the green room herself, Lady B. Mrs. Blake is also here as well.
Who is very far away from the microphone.
Who is very far away from the microphone, but don't worry, we're going to remedy that in a moment. In just a moment's time, we are going to meet our first guest. John Paul Davis is in the studio. He's poised as a spring, ready to talk to us. We're going to find out exactly what he does in his world of counselling and psychotherapy and being a life coach and an author. My goodness me, is there anything else that we can add to that impressive CV? We'll find out in just a moment's time. But Mrs. B, before we let you go back to the green room, I believe that you've been finding some inspirational quotes. Now, I don't want anyone sort of listening to this and thinking, oh, good gracious me, is this the kind of radio station this has turned into? But they start reading namby-pamby stuff from books. No. The reason why they're inspirational, these quotes, is because genuinely they're words that are designed to help. And actually, having heard a little preview of them before we went live at midday, I actually do believe that you've chosen wonders. Now, perhaps, Mrs. B, would you just explain to us what it is you have found and why you thought it appropriate to read it to us?
Sorry, this is the Fisher King.
Who's the Fisher King is what? Sorry,
Robert A. Johnson. It's a very deep spiritual book, but it will go the Holy Grail. It's about the Fisher King. It's about the wound of a man that is unable to heal only spiritually. Only spiritually. I didn't.
You're nodding along. Have you read it, Dennis?
No, this is just when I did my studies.
Well, that was a quick conversation.
This book was profound when I first found it, and it touched me deeply. They talk about that in the Western world we have lost our feelings. We are scientifically, we can think and we are far ahead, but our feelings we ignore, and we can never, and until we connect with our feelings, we can't heal. So it says we can understand the term feeling more accurately if we define it as a capacity to value or to give worth to something. People who have a finely differentiated feeling function bring grace and good feeling with them. One feels valuable in their presence. The wounded feeling function is so common in our Western world that one must completely leave this civilization to gain insight into the problem. America reveals some of its specific characteristics only when viewed from Europe. Our Western world reveals some of its secrets only when reviewed from the East. So it says that we can have, it's about having everything on the outside, and whatever you have on the outside, you will always want more. You will have a new car, but you will then want
So in essence, it's the worship of materialism.
Yes, but it also talks about not being able to be joined in the presence of beauty. He talks about when he goes to listen to Handel's Messiah at the Carnegie Hall, and he can't. The pain is so severe because it's so beautiful, but he can't feel the beauty. So
it's kind of saying you have to be present, you have to be there, you have to experience it, and you can't do that if you're hurt.
It's about being able to receive love. People are so damaged. People are so damaged by their wound that they cannot receive love. They can give and give and give it. And within this becomes the loneliness of the soul and things I've spoken about before. Mm-hmm. The ego is so hurt that it cannot accept beauty or love when it's given.
Well, that is most definitely food for thought. Now, speaking of being in the presence of beauty, I think it is time to introduce our very first guest. And do you see what I did there? That was a seamless link, if I say so myself. We welcome to Men's Radio Station. Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. B. We much appreciate your wise words there. But now it is time for us to speak to John Paul Davis. Now, John Paul is a psychotherapist, he's a counsellor. I listed beforehand some very impressive subjects that he works in, according to my notes here, via the researcher, if you're not agreeing with this. Specialises in working with adults experiencing difficulties such as anxiety, stress management, depression, addictions, compulsions, codependence, lack of meaning and purpose, narcissism, issues around sex and sexuality, and lack of self-esteem and confidence. You're a very busy man, sir.
I am, yeah. Some people come with all of them. It's but yeah.
I was actually going to get onto that, funnily enough, not quite as quickly, but seeing as you have brought it up, it would be interesting to explore that. Is it almost a case of that when people come to you that you have almost a checklist of what their problems are and then that's how you address it? Or is it that you find that someone has to meet a certain criteria? How does someone coming to you with whatever these issues are depend on how you can help them?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that probably most people come through with now is actually anxiety, I would say. That's the most common thing. You know, with men, it's a bit more anger issues, addiction, sometimes depression. And as I say, I do occasionally get people that ring up and say that it's all of the above. So that's absolutely possible in terms of people's distress. But there are things I'm much more, familiar working with. Anxiety would be one of them, narcissism. I think the roots of them, actually, of everything on that list is very similar. I mean, linking into what you said earlier about people's feeling function and the fact that that sort of cognitive, rational thinking function tends to dominate and get rewarded in our society, is that what gets put on the back burner really is people's feeling function. And you'll see from that list what generally brings people into therapy is always feelings. It's anger, anxiety, depression, you could say, is a lack of feeling.
Have feelings changed over the years, do you think?
No, and I think another interesting thing that comes up a lot is that people can get quite frightened of feelings. I think it's people, I think, go into therapy because they don't have a great relationship with their felt experience. They may not even be feeling that much at all. They're not aware when they're anxious. They're not particularly aware when they're angry. And also, as importantly, when you were talking about love, they're not aware when they're enjoying something particularly. So how do you know what to come away from or what to go towards? That's the important thing that feelings do, is they give us a sense of what should be in our lives potentially and what shouldn't. And I don't think it's actually that much more complicated than that with people. But what we tend to do, because we lose contact with that feeling function, is we don't really have the language for it. So a lot of people, when they say what they're feeling, if I ask them what they're feeling, they'll actually say what they're thinking. So they'll say, I felt like I wasn't welcome, or I felt like that was a good place for me to be. But actually, after the word felt, that's all a thought. Feelings are generally one word, anger.
So how can people tell the difference then? How are people expected to know the difference between a thought and an actual feeling?
Well, a feeling is one of those things which is important, is that feelings are generally, they're a physiological experience and generally felt in the body. There have been studies done where 25 people have identified where they feel love or where they feel fear, and they've marked it on the body. And that's, you can see across the board, people generally feel love, warmth across the chest, for example, anxiety and anger, tingling in the hands, butterflies with anxiety. So they're sort of physiological experiences. And another thing that can happen where people's thinking function dominates is they come away from their felt experience and also their body. So, a big thing about anxiety is people are disconnected from their body, both in terms of feelings and also don't have a good relationship with it. So, as I say, generally thinking or feelings are one word. So, love, anger, fear.
And I'm sorry to introduce such a big question so early on in the conversation, but in your experience, the way that one reacts to certain feelings, would you say is nature or nurture?
I think there's a nurture, absolutely, brain chemistry. If you're looking at fear and anger, they are inborn, impulsive, automatic experiences. And I think one of the things that I talk about in the book is our default is probably to spend much more time in them in terms of fear and anger than we actually need to. We're much safer than we need to be, much safer than we believe we are most of the time. So, but I think, so fear and anger we do need to manage. Those are the only two that need to be managed, I would say.
When you say manage them, what do you mean? Because a lot of people have said that you shouldn't hide your anger. You should be with it and you should kind of embrace it. Is that sort of what you're talking about when you're saying managing it?
Well, I am. I suppose one of the things that I've written about in the book is not to make anything, whether that's fear or anger, a bad thing. What fuels people's distress often is internal conflict. So to think anger is a bad thing is just getting angry at yourself for being angry. So it's more of the same.
It's just a negative feedback
Exactly,
loop, yeah.
Exactly. I also think, though, that fear and anger tend to feed themselves. So because we've layered an imagination on top of a physiological response, it doesn't just pass in a second like it should do. People are spending their entire waking moments, and probably a lot of the time that they're sleeping too, more fearful than they need to be, or actually more angry, which is often the case with men, I think, than they need to be. So I do think that process needs to be short-circuited somehow. So I talk about in the book as well the sort of mindfulness and meditation. I think they're amazing, and they're very much about being with a feeling or a thought and not making it wrong. I also think we need to make sure we're not jumping on fear and anger, and also making bigger those things that we enjoy. So excitement, passion, joy, love, because I don't think we'll naturally do that. So I do think some management needs to happen too.
The problem is that a lot of people say that we let's just look at a smaller picture here in terms of the UK, because I can't really argue for people around the world. I'm not really overly familiar with other cultures and other countries. But certainly here in the UK, one thing that it often comes up is that our attitude towards feelings are not quite the same way as they were, say, let's just take, I don't know, around 80 years ago, around the time of the war. And when people say that when their priorities are different, your attitude towards such as feelings such as anger, okay, there may have been anger towards the invasions and towards what the primarily Germans were obviously doing during World War II, but their attitudes towards other feelings such as stress or such as hurt and upset, all of these were managed differently because their priorities were different. So do you think that it's a good thing that we are more aware in general as a society about different feelings, or could it be that we've almost taken a step backwards because we now have this horrible situation where we almost overanalyze everything?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would see it as a step forward. I mean, if you're talking about war, the priority there is survival. So things like suck it up, get on with it. I can see why.
Keep calm and carry on. Right?
Exactly. I can see why those.
So you don't agree with that notion?
I think that that if we suck it up, i.e. don't listen to what we're feeling, over time we just lose connection with that experience. So, as I say, we lose the very important messages that feelings give, which is whether we go towards something or whether to come away from it. And if we don't get those messages, or we're not acting on it, that's why, you know, so many people, largely, I think, are in therapy or addicted, or...
But what might the ramifications be if one wasn't to act on it? I'm going to give me as an example, because I don't know anyone else, really.
Yeah.
So I'll use me as an example, and I would say that whenever I look at a news story, and it could be the most tragic news story that you've seen for a long time, and I'm going to be blunt here, okay? I'm very transparent, I think, and I'm going to use the Grenfell Tower as an example. I have often said that for working most of my working life in a newsroom and seeing these horror stories day in, day out, okay, there was nothing quite as horrific as Grenfell since probably the terror attacks that have either taken place in New York or in London. But all the same, I find myself unable to react to something like that anymore. And it is not because I don't care, it's not because I don't look at it and think, my goodness me, isn't that awful, it's because it's just another day in the life of what I do. Does that then suddenly have a dreadful impact on me as an individual? Am I going to have to start worrying about what other people think because of me being as transparent as that and saying I can't feel? What's the problem with me not feeling about that?
Desensitized.
I am totally and utterly desensitized.
But that's how it starts. I'm sorry, this is not about me. This is about if you don't know how to connect to your feelings, it's the most wonderful thing. Once it starts to happen, your thoughts will drive you mad. They will create a paranoia. You will think, but when you feel something, you know it's right. When you're operating your thoughts, oh, maybe they're blanking me, maybe they're talking about me. When you start to feel, you can tell the difference. You can become whole again.
Yes.
Sorry.
But then I suppose that off the back of that is that surely one has to recognise that they are not whole. So with me being desensitized to horrific news stories, I don't look at that necessarily as a problem, but other people might.
I don't see that as a problem either. I mean, you're going to get a felt response to something, and somebody else isn't going to. If you look at something like the Grenfell Tower, for somebody that provokes great anger and distress and concern, and they'll act on that and do something about that. For somebody else, it doesn't. I don't think that makes anybody a bad person, or different things are going to draw different people. I mean, actually, not talking about the Grenfell Tower specifically, but if we're looking at things that frighten and anger people, that will be whatever your amygdala comes forward and tells you is frightening and ought to make you angry. And as I say, I think that is something that needs to be managed generally, because if we get angry or frightened about everything that is intrusively comes into our brain, we will spend all of our time worrying about things that we have absolutely no control over. So on the basis that what most of us want is happiness, contentment, a sense of purpose, being frightened and angry about things is not a place.
So you see, that I think that's what it is. I'm so sorry, this is turning into a therapy session for me. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
But this is exactly where I think that my thought processes lie, is that it is something that is totally and utterly beyond my control.
Yeah.
And therefore, why am I going to get stressed or upset about it? Because I can't change it.
Yes.
If it's something that stresses or upsets me and it's something that I can change, then I feel it's almost more justified. But then when I tell other people that that's the way I personally behave, they seem almost shocked.
Yes, I mean, I'm sit more in the camp that you do, I would say, but I have clients and obviously no friends who are very much concerned about things that are, and campaign for things that I would say is very much not within their control. So I mean, I've been writing a little article, I haven't done anything with it yet, but it's about that principle, not to put too fine a point on it, of I don't give an F, because
quite
yes, because it was shown there was a drama, I think it was a BBC drama with Emma Thompson in it, and somebody mentioned, I don't know, Palestine or something, and she was supposed to be an MP and a member of Parliament or a politician, and she turned around and said, I don't give about it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll use the word stuff. We will. For all intents and
the impression I think that was given in the drama is that was a bad thing, is that people who don't care about things other than what's within their own backyard are somehow.
Does that make someone selfish?
Well, I mean, I think that's the inference from the show. But I would say, I mean, I definitely think to care about things outside of your own backyard shows that you care about the wider community, that you see yourself and experience yourself as part of a wider world, and those are all good, a connection to your world, and that you're a part of something bigger, I think is a sign of psychological well-being and health. I also think that, as I say, when that part pushes forward, we can end up caring far too much about things that are really, not to put too fine a point on it, not really any of our business. And
I think that's the point.
Yeah.
I wonder whether or not we've become so blurred as a society that we sort of forget there's an awful lot of stuff, and I hate the word stuff, but there's an awful lot of stuff out there in the ether that is not our business.
Yeah.
It is not our concern, but yet we think we have the answers.
Absolutely.
And I worry whether or not that sort of sometimes people spend too long worrying about other people's business and less so looking at their own world. Whereas if we were just responsible for our own little ethos, then our own little world, then I wonder whether or not sort of maybe we'd hone in a bit and we'd perfect it a bit more.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about, in just a moment's time, some of the ways in which that you help specific individuals, maybe not necessarily the individuals themselves. We won't talk about cases, because obviously that's confidential, but we will talk a bit about what would happen if someone was to come to you and what they were to say. But I believe that we are going to take a caller, which is dreadfully exciting, and I believe that based on the location, I'm going to hazard a guess that we can speak to Fenella, who is in Whetstone. Fenella, can you hear us? Oh, hello, Fenella.
Hello, Fenella.
Oh dear. Technology continues to betwixt us here at Men's Radio Station.
Never quite works the way it wants to work, does it? Hello, Fenella.
Fenella, can you hear us?
I think I can hear something.
Do you know what I think? I think what we're going to do is we're going to try and suss out in just a moment's time what's happening with the phone and why she can't hear us, but hopefully we'll speak to her in just a moment's time. Okay, well, like I said, let's go back to that very subject, John Paul. And if you are wondering who you're listening to, you are just hearing the wise words of John Paul Davis, who is our very special guest this hour. He's a counsellor, he's a psychotherapist, a life coach, and an author. He's joining us live here on Men's Radio Station. And before, I was saying about how some of the different elements that you help people who come to see you, and you said that sometimes the long list that I read out, they actually can come to you with all of these different elements. But let's imagine that you've got someone who walks through the door as a brand new case, and they say that, look, I'm suffering a little bit with anxiety, I get a bit stressed, but I don't know whether or not it's bad enough to warrant getting help, but others around me think I do need help. How do you gauge that? How do you measure whether or not someone is, dare I say, worthy of help? Or in need, perhaps, in need of help? How would you gauge that?
Well, I would gauge that in terms of their language, the kind of things that they say about themselves and the world. It comes through very clearly in how somebody expresses themselves, if they're more fearful than they need to be, or actually more angry than they need to be. And generally, those are both in the same place. So depression as well can come through in people's language. I mean, I have to say, if somebody's going to give the time and the money to come through the door and sit down with somebody that they don't know and entrust them with personal details, they're probably in a position where they can benefit from therapy. I do, because I see quite a lot of men, get a proportion of men who come because somebody else has told them to come and said that they need to come, which is fine as a way of coming through the door. I mean, I don't have conversations with spouses. I only speak to the person who is going to come.
But is that fine, though? Because I can't help but wonder whether or not the first step to someone actually obtaining the help that they do potentially need would be recognising themselves that they have an issue.
Yeah, and in the book that I've written, one of the first things that I say that people need to do is to take responsibility. So when we get frightened, when we get angry, I'm only saying that because those are the two most common things I would see. They tend to be very outward focused experiences. So what we'll tend to be doing is looking at other people's behaviour, wondering why they do that, that my life would be better, that things would be better for me if other people changed their behaviour. And that's absolutely true. But the trouble is we can't control other people's behaviour. All we can do is look at our responses to it. So certainly a question that I would ask early on, something that I would be looking for, is how somebody says they're going to be different. That's not to say that the other person isn't doing things that are annoying or difficult, but how is it that they're going to change their response, because we can't control this other person. And also, if I change my response to another person, it fundamentally changes the dynamic of the relationship anyway. So it has a profound impact on the other person too. So it's fine that somebody comes because somebody else has said it to them. I think some people say that because they know there's an issue, but they would just rather not. It's a difficult experience for people. I understand that, coming to therapy. They would rather tell me through somebody else's words what they're having a difficulty with. But certainly, within a session or two, it needs to catch internally. It needs to become an inward-out experience where intrinsically they see the benefit of talking about their experience and get a benefit from doing that. Because if that doesn't happen, it just becomes a question and answer session. It becomes a tick box. I'm doing this because I'm pleasing my partner, and that just doesn't work.
And they don't necessarily really believe in the cause.
No.
I feel like we're speaking a lot in hypotheses here. We're talking about different certain cases that may or may not arise, that someone may have a reaction to something and therefore need this sort of help. Have you got any specific examples, obviously maintaining confidentiality and not necessarily mentioning any individuals' names, but is there any example you can actually give us of a situation that you've had maybe recently or maybe from a distance that's really stuck in your mind as a case, as someone that you've really helped and how you've helped them?
There is somebody that I can think of. It's the range of people that I would see is probably, from sort of 17 up to 77. So this person was an older man, around 60s, and became with anger, actually. It was in relationship with his partner. It was his partner who said he needed to come. Had been into therapy a few times before, but again, that experience of anger was that my partner is behaving in this way, which I find difficult, and actually the partner is sometimes, inevitably. We all have that amygdala part of the brain that comes forward, and things, we're programmed. It is protective, that part of us. So it's bound to come forward and tell us when somebody's doing something that comes over our boundaries. And we need the message from that. If we're talking about the message from feelings earlier, anger gives a very important message as to what other people, from the point of view of our experience, should be doing or shouldn't be doing around us. But of course, if we'd react from anger, which is what he was doing, we tend to, anger's a place of I'm right and you're wrong. So it's a place of no empathy. I dehumanize you and you become a perpetrator and I become a victim. And if I get angry, I then, whilst believing I'm a victim, actually perpetrate psychologically, or even actually, on you, and you become a victim, and that's what people get caught in, unfortunately. But this guy, has come for 5 or 6 sessions. The thing about a sort of anxious and angry brain is it tends to be that sort of over-aroused brain, so working very quickly. And when they come to certain realizations, people, it can shift very quickly as well, actually. An anxious brain, I find, is easier to shift than somebody who's depressed. This guy, I can't remember certain things, sort of things like I'm safe, he would say to himself. I can trust other people. The fact he could choose his response, that we talked about de-escalating situations. If you raise your voice, I have a natural mirror neurons, which mean I raise mine. So, and then up we go. So somebody has to de-escalate it. So we would talk about that. And within 3 or 4 sessions, he would sit there for 50 minutes and say it changed his life, effectively.
Amazing.
It
Absolutely
changed it.
Amazing. Well, do you know what? We're going to explore this a little more. We're also going to find out more about the book that you have put together as well. That is all coming up here on Men's Radio Station. If you do want to get in contact, if you are listening to our guest, John Paul Davis, and you're thinking that sounds very familiar, it resonates with me, please get in contact. 0203 290 4411, and we will come back right after this.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you, then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Your call is important to us. You are now number 15 in a queue.
At Profile Insurance Services, we treat people as individuals. You'll speak to a real person, not a call centre. We're fast, small, independent, and have a superb team of insurance specialists. And they're really nice too. Advice is totally free and we cover everything. Call 0208 931 3306. Listeners to Men's radio station won't pay a penny for admin fees. That's 0208 931 3306. With Profile Insurance Services, you're covered.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30pm on Men's radio station, where men really talk.
Let me tell you about Jermyn Street Theatre. We are the smallest theatre in the West End, only 70 seats. We are a registered charity and not grant-aided, run by a small team of volunteers and trustees. Jermyn Street Theatre is a hidden gem. It combines the comfort and convenience of the West End with the intimacy of a studio. Every seat has a perfect view of the stage, and even a whisper is audible. This is a secret theatre in the heart of the West End, once found, never forgotten.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Davis. I'm the proud owner of Stout Cigars in Mayfair and Knightsbridge. For the past 60 years, we've been providing the world's best Cuban cigars. When it comes to cigars, there's no other than Stout Cigars from Mayfair and Knightsbridge. We at Stouters would like to wish Men's radio station every support in their task for helping men's emotional and mental well-being. Check them out. Men's radio station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Indeed, we do really talk. It has just gone 1 o'clock. It is still, to the best of my knowledge, Sunday the 14th of July 2019, and you join us on the second hour of Men's Radio Station, live from Covent Garden, this rather, well, different Sunday afternoon. In case you have maybe escaped some attention, there are some rather important sporting events going on today. So, of course, if you are listening to Men's Radio Station, we are very grateful for your company. And just in case you're wondering, no, Russ Kane is not here this week. I'm so sorry. You're lumbered with yours truly. Phil Dave in the hot seat until 3 o'clock this afternoon. But you'll be delighted to learn that I am by no stretch of the imaginations alone. Oh, no. I am joined, as ever, by the boy wonder producer, who is Mr. James Blake, also known as the finger on the feed, and he is pressing all the buttons and making sure we don't fall off air. We also have in the studio the goddess of the green room. Yes, we've persuaded her to talk this week. Goddess of the green room, Lady B herself, is also here, and somewhere in the building, I'm not quite sure where he is, I think he's sorting out something technical, Dennis Relojo-howell, Mr. Social Media himself, is also here. We are right in the middle, though, of speaking to our first guest this week, John Paul Davis. Now, John Paul is a counsellor, is a psychotherapist, a life coach, and an author, and I'd like to pick up on the author part, because, John Paul, you have put together a book. What is the title of said book?
Finding a Balanced Connection.
And exactly what is finding a balanced connection? What does one have to do to find a balanced connection, shall we say?
Well, I tell you in the book.
Excellent. I see. So you're not giving away too much. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, based on that, what prompted you to put said book together?
Yes. Well, I put it together because it's in a formula, I suppose, which I've read a lot of psychotherapy books, a lot of books as part of the training and also as professional development since. So it was a combination of things that I hadn't seen put together in that way before. It's all of the things that I found helpful during my own process, during the therapy training, and also with clients since. I've been seeing clients for about 10 years now. So it's things that clients have said to me. It's things that people have brought back and said they found that helpful. And I sort of see 20 to 25 people a week at the moment. And it's just a great way of getting lots of other people to read things which I think are helpful.
And when you say that it's based on people who've come to... Actually, do you know what? Before we get on to that, you say that you've been seeing people professionally for 10 years. Then I'm intrigued. What did you do before?
I was a solicitor in the city.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
I did not see that, didn't you? My goodness me.
What a
Wow.
180 that is.
Yeah.
That's definitely a change in direction. Okay, well, we've got to explore this further. What prompted the change in career path?
Whoa. First of all, what kind of solicitor? What were you specialising in?
I was in the banking department. I was a project finance solicitor.
Finance?
Yeah,
Solicitor?
project finance.
Good
There you
Lord.
go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we need to speak to you afterwards. Men's radio station and all that, it's low, budget. No, but in all seriousness, what prompted such a dramatic change in career path? Because surely that's a very high-end job, one can only assume a well-paid job. And what prompted the change in gear?
Well, I was 10 years down the line. Lots of great things about it as a career, but just wasn't really personality-wise all me. I was in therapy, so I took a year off. I had a career break. It was very good of them to agree to do that. And during that career break, I did a counselling course, a foundation course, a screenwriting course as well, and did some voluntary work. And it just went from there, really.
Here at MRS, we are known for our impertinence, and I hope you forgive us for it, but we are frank. We are open. We do talk. And tell me to mind my own business if you so wish. But are you prepared to say why you ended up in therapy?
Mind your own business. No, I was in therapy for addictive issues, but also anxiety, I would say. So all the things I talk about in the book, the things that I see people for every day. So, yeah.
So it is as a result of it. You are probably best placed to help others because you've been through it yourself. And unlike a lot of... I'm not sort of saying unlike a lot of therapists, because I don't know a lot of therapists, but one would assume that a lot of therapists have really good intentions in mind, and they want to help others, but they can't necessarily relate to those who they're helping because they might not have necessarily been through it themselves. So the fact that you have been, do you think that makes you better placed than quite a lot?
Potentially, yes. I mean, I do think most people are more fearful than they need to be. Everybody's addicted to something or dependent on something, so more attached to a substance and behaviour, whether that's food or exercise or money or power or alcohol or than they need to be. So I think most people, in terms of human experience, can relate to the things on that list, actually. I certainly think in terms of something like addictive behaviour, there will be people that say, well, why doesn't somebody just stop? Something has those adverse consequences on behaviour and is having such a terrible effect on your life. Why would you carry on doing it? And I do think that's something that that's not true that you can only really understand it if you have been through it. But
it gives you a heck of an advantage.
I think it does. The extent to which somebody experiences a loss of choice. The thing is, of course, in terms of the taking responsibility, we have to realise that it is a choice and work towards that. But I don't think you necessarily have to have been through it to help people, but I definitely think it helps hugely, actually, for empathy.
Right, now, John Paul, put on some headphones for me, sir, because I'm delighted to say that we think we have resolved our little technical hiccup from before, and I'm very much hopeful that I'm going to be able to say hello to Fenella, who is in Whetstone, who now hopefully joins us on the line. Fenella, can you hear us now?
I can.
Hurrah! Hello, Fenella. How are we?
Hello, Phil.
Yes, hello. How are you? I mean, I think I should probably explain to anyone who sort of says, oh, now, hang on a second, she sounds over-familiar. Sorry, Fenella.
Go on, you should explain.
I should explain. You're absolutely right. That Fenella and I have spoken for many a year, but probably more familiarly in an off-air environment. And that is because when I have done some of my past work in producing radio programmes rather than fronting them, which, don't get me wrong, is still by and large what I do during my week, I have spoken to Fenella, who has always been an A1 contributor to various radio phone-ins that I've produced. And I consider it an immense honour that Fenella, you have graced the airwaves that I am now dominating with your tone. So thank you very much indeed for picking up the phone. And to anyone else who feels moved in the same capacity, 0203 290 4411 is the telephone number here at Men's Radio Station. Fenella, we're talking about addiction, and today's programme is going to be heavily based on that. Now, obviously, it may not have escaped people's notice that you are not necessarily male, but I want to stress that that does not matter here at Men's Radio Station. We actually would welcome any caller, whoever you are, and whatever you identify as. Why have you felt moved to call us today, apart from speaking to me, of course?
Well, of course, Phil, when I saw your tweet, it was such a delight, because I haven't spoken to you for quite a while, and but, of course, you know, addiction for me has been a huge problem, and I also, in my mental health work, I'm very aware that men coming forward with mental health difficulties is a big issue. I mean, if you go to a doctor's waiting room, you will see during the day there's, you know, a predominance of women in the waiting room. It's got better over the years, much better. But women find it, for some reason, easier to come forward and ask for help on whether it's from mild to moderate depression to medical problems, which they might put off for quite a while, which could be quite serious. And there's an issue about not wanting to bother the doctor and not wanting to make a fuss. And also, for men who are breadwinners in a family to take time off and go and seek medical help, whatever the problem, is a huge stigma. And what people don't realise is that most employers will give them paid time off. Well, they should do. Certainly in the public sector, they're entitled to paid time off.
Fenella, you raise a lot of valid points there, and I want to explore some of them. Unfortunately, we don't have a great deal of time, so let's pick some of them apart. The first one being is that you said women find it easier to ask for help. Do you really still believe that to be the case, even though that we live in a day and age where we've got, I'm not just talking about Men's Radio Station, because obviously Men's Radio Station is still quite infant. We only started at the beginning of this year, but it is much more commonplace now that people are encouraged to speak about mental health and their feelings, and to say that we are encouraged not to necessarily be afraid of getting help. Do you still really believe it the case that men are worried about asking for help?
I think in British culture, for people of the younger generation who are born in this country from whichever ethnic origin they come from, it's got much, much better. For men who come from African, Asian cultures, Arab cultures, where they were born abroad but they live here now, they might very well be anglicised, but they have traditional cultural values of those perhaps of their parents and the older generations, where the stigma around mental health is still very much there. I'll give you one very real example, and this is in relation to addiction. I have a carer, and her husband suffers from quite severe chronic pain. He's addicted to his opioids.
I'm so sorry, Fernanda. He's addicted to what, sorry?
Sorry?
We didn't quite catch that. He's addicted to his what, sorry?
Opioids, painkillers.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Okay.
Okay, he's on quite high doses. He's of African origin, and although he's lived here 14 years, and he's in his 50s, and he's clinically depressed. And I said to her, I don't understand why he doesn't go and get help for the depression. Why doesn't he ask his GP at least for antidepressants? And she said, because he doesn't believe in depression.
Well, now there's a very interesting
believe in it.
thought, Fenella. That's a very interesting thought right here and there, because John Paul Davis, our counsellor, psychotherapist, and life coach and author, is in the studio still with us. This chap that Fenella's referring to, quote, doesn't believe in depression. Is that a common occurrence, would you say?
I suppose. I mean, I wouldn't really hear that if somebody's come through the door. Then, often with men, they'll have had a diagnosis of depression or anxiety. I've had people say to me they don't believe in counselling or therapy, which is that people are perfectly entitled to believe whatever they want to believe. But what I notice with men, less that they don't believe it exists, more that they believe that a lack of feeling or not showing feeling is a sign of strength and is something to be aspired to, actually. The thing is, men's limbic system is a similar size to women, so the men's capacity to feel is similar to women. And unfortunately, if you disconnect from feeling, it will be the thing that brings you down. So the quicker we get used to the fact that we have feelings as much as women do, and that to talk about them in relationship with another person enables us to manage them and process them, and not make them bigger than they actually are. Because I think that's what can happen, as I was saying earlier, is if we disconnect from them, they become this sort of monstrous thing that we don't really understand and know what to do with. And actually, they're a very helpful thing.
Fidela, just finally, has your carer's husband ever been challenged, do you know, on that statement that he doesn't believe in depression, especially when it's a very real prospect to quite a lot of people? It's quite an extraordinary claim, really. Has he ever been challenged on it, do you know?
No, I think, she's tearing her hair out. And I think my point about it is, firstly, there is help for addiction, particularly with opioids. There are really good reduction programs around through substance misuse services, alcohol services, and other drugs. Secondly, treatment does work, but sometimes it can take 2 or 3 goes. It's not the first time you try. Sometimes it takes quite a lot of persistence and gumption, and then you can go through it and come through and feel much, much better. But what's the most important thing is holding your hand up and saying, do you know what, guys? I actually need help with this. And talking to your mates, getting support, not just medical treatment or the support or the therapy, but the hand-holding around you. A lot of evidence for peer support works wonders with clinical support and therapy. So that's what I would say. And don't feel that you're less of a man for owning up to what's going on. In fact, it takes great courage to do that, whether you're a man or a woman.
Indeed it does. Fenella, do you know what? It also takes, I think, a great deal of courage for people to pick up the phone and to speak to, well, especially me, live on radio. And for that, I thank you so much. The only reason I'm moving on is because we've actually got quite limited time left with our guest, John Paul Davis, and don't want him to go anywhere just yet. We've got a couple more questions to throw in. But I want to say thank you. I really, really mean that. It does mean a great deal to anyone who sits behind a microphone and always says to people, please do call in, and gives the number. You can't take it for granted that people are going to call in, both men and women alike, whoever you are, wherever you are. To phone into Men's Radio Station does take a certain element of courage. To be transparent, to talk about the situation you find yourself in is something that we absolutely don't take for granted, and I truly am very grateful. It is wonderful to hear your dulcet tones again. I very much think that we will speak sooner than later the next time round. Fenella, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. If you would like to call as well, then you can always call 0203 290 4411. You heard Fenella do it. It is really very straightforward. Give us a call. You'll speak to the lovely Dennis. He'll take your call, find out what you want to say to us, and then he'll put you on the air. 0203 290 4411.
0203 290 4411.
Excellent. Anyway, we have been asking on Twitter. We've been having a Twitter poll. And we've been asking people what they think about the notion of addiction and those who face addiction and whether or not there is enough help out there. We've actually put the question to you, do we as a nation offer those facing addiction enough help and support? Your choices are very simple. Either yes, support is readily available, or no, we should be doing more. And curiously, 86% of you say no, we should be doing more. I think that's very telling, because I can't take for granted, John Paul Davis, that the people who have answered that poll are those who maybe are going through some form of addiction themselves. But I also can't take for granted that they maybe don't know somebody who has tried to get help that isn't readily available. One way or another, 86% of our Twitter following believes that we should be doing more as a society to help those who face addiction. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. In terms of state-funded care, there isn't a huge amount, really. You know, there's very long waiting lists for any kind of one-to-one therapy. Also, the thing that I would say about addictive behaviour is that group therapy is very helpful for it. But there is, of course, 12-step groups, whatever people think about the basis of it in terms of higher powers, etc. Those are free.
So those of us who don't know, sorry, what are 12-step groups? Sorry.
They're groups of fellowships where people who experience addictive behaviour, there are, gosh, I put in the book actually the number that there are. There's, you know, Under Earners Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Users Anonymous. There's a 12-step group for most types of dependent behaviour now. But
and of course, they're the sort of the complementary ones to the same ones that we know as sort of Alcoholics Anonymous and
Exactly.
Gamblers Anonymous.
Exactly.
It's all the same sort of premise,
all the same
isn't it?
thing, same premise, same steps. Some of them have slightly different rules. You know, some of them are open meetings, other ones are closed. So some you can bring relatives to. So they're available all over the country. There are websites that list them for all of those different over. You know, you could go to, when people start in terms of drug addiction, for example, or they can go to a group every night, and actually they probably need to at the beginning. So, or you know, 30 groups in 30 days is the type of thing that people go through, and all of that's free. I think you make a contribution if you can. You know, then there are the private providers who charge tens of thousands of pounds for inpatient care. So I would say absolutely, in terms of state-provided care for it, or state-funded, it's not great at all. But I would say the same for anxiety and depression as well, really.
But is it not so greatly provided by the state because there are lots of these groups alternatives? Are they sort of saying like, well, we don't need to, why do we need state-funded anonymous groups when we have...
Yeah. I mean,
ones?
I don't know the reason why they don't. I suspect it is a financial thing. Having said that, you know, these 12-step groups, for example, there may be other groups too. They're just the ones that I'm aware of.
And I think the 12-step. I mean, I'm not a part of one, but a friend of mine is, and I think it's done him very, very well.
Yeah.
So I think they're actually quite good.
Definitely, and they do something which one-to-one therapy, for example, with addicted clients isn't able to do, because I see clients once a week for 50 minutes, whereas if you do as well as, say, one-to-one therapy, attend groups, you can get a sponsor, so you can speak to somebody anytime you're having a difficulty. And that's the trouble with addiction. It can be, you know, 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning when you experience a craving that might tip you into acting out again. So I, as a psychotherapist, I'm not available at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, but a sponsor might be. So in terms of addictive behaviour, I think the groups are really good. As I say, whatever you believe about the structure of them, because they did originate from the
religious group,
exactly,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to ask, so I feel like the 12-step groups, one thing they're really good at is helping people create a structure for themselves away from sort of the addictive traits.
Yeah.
Is that something you'd kind of agree with as well?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing, I put it a bit in the book, and it was generally, I would say, for anxiety and depression and everything where people get in distress. But I think it's a 12-step statement, which is that cultivation undoes craving, which means that if you want to, you can't crave for something, you know, crave for the alcohol or the drugs or the sex or the gambling, and also be cultivating something. So growing something in life, connection with self, relationships with other people, doing particular activities. So what the 12-step groups do, which I think is incredibly valuable, is they provide an attachment to others, connections with others. And you do service, so you might go and provide make tea for people, and also could become a sponsor to other people as well. So that helping other people is a very helpful thing to do psychologically as well.
Well, that's why I think the 12 Steps groups are amazing, because it provides you with a community. You stop feeling alone.
Absolutely.
You don't feel like I'm the only alcoholic in the world. You know, and there's people there to support you and to fall back on. So if something does happen, I think they do great. I think they're really good. I would to go with the Twitter part, I would maybe disagree. I think maybe we do quite a lot. I think it's quite a serious issue, and we handle it quite well. So,
I think in relation to addressing addiction, I think it's also important to recognize.
Dennis, is your phone on?
No.
I think it is.
We appear to have a phone that's buzzing away there.
No, it's not.
Look, there's some buzzing. Maybe do you want to come around to the other side of the desk then?
I'll tell you what. Let's see if that works any better. Now try.
No, it's on my phone.
Oh. It was someone else's phone. Dun, dun, dun.
I think it was a charger. I think it was a charger wreaking havoc. So there you go. Dennis, sorry, what did you want to say?
What I was saying earlier is that I think in relation to addressing addiction, I think it's also important to recognize that addressing addiction is actually a collective effort. So it's not just the role of the government in terms of funding, and also the role of mental health professionals like yourself, but we also have to recognize the role of the parents in the family. So as a mental health professional, what advice would you give to parents and families who have family members who have addiction? What I'm saying is that we do have I'm not sure if we have enough support from the government or from other agencies, but ultimately the big role lies within the family and the parents. So what would be your advice on that?
Well, I would say, it's incredibly difficult if we're talking about parents and a child, watching a child become addicted to something. There's a few things there. I think there can be some denial. There's a lot of self-talk around addictive behaviour in terms of the person who is addicted, a lot of denial around it. And I think that can also be supported depending on the parent, depending on the caregiver, by them too. That, nobody wants to believe that their child is out of control and potentially doing something which is dangerous, could end in their death. So I think there's, being honest about it is important. Sometimes parents, sometimes caregivers don't have the capacity to take the step away and see it. Sometimes they do, though. And if they do, the other thing to say there, which is very difficult, I think, is we only have a limited capacity to affect somebody else, to affect change in somebody else. Some parents will think that, if I tell them to stop or do something about it, they will. If we're talking about adults here, adult children, they have 1 trillion neurons, patterns of behaviour. It's incredibly difficult to get somebody else to change behaviour. So I have a huge amount of sympathy and empathy for anybody as a caregiver, of course, as an addict as well, but as a caregiver experiencing that.
I think as a caregiver, it's especially hard. I think definitely there needs to be some support for caregivers out there in roles of, because it's like you said, it's to see someone you love go down that path, it's terribly painful. And maybe they don't know what they're doing. Maybe they don't know the best ways to help either. So it could be good to have those kind of educative themes. Don't they do 12-step groups for people of caregivers?
They do.
As well?
They do. As I say, some of the groups are open, so which it means anybody can come and they can listen to other people's experiences. They
do Pacific groups, don't they? So if, for example, you like a friend who shall remain unnamed is an alcoholic, and he invited me to go to something called Al-Anon, I think it is, which is like for if you have people who are alcoholics, and to sort of go there and discuss what's going on. So there's a sort of group for everything almost.
Now, John Paul, I'm really ashamed to say that we have run out of time. I couldn't believe I could happily chat with you for another hour. We'd love you to stick around. If you want to stick around, you're welcome to. If you need to dart off, then please feel free. But I think we need to get one more mention of the book in before we let you go, if you did want to trot off. So what's the name of the book for anyone?
Finding a Balanced Connection.
Okay, and I'm hoping it's available in all the good and usual places. As I say, please do stick around if you're able to. We'd love you to. But that is John Paul Davis, counsellor, psychotherapist, life coach and author, speaking to us with absolute fascination about just some of the subjects that he deals with on a near daily basis with his clients. And I just have to ask, I'm going to put you on the spot, will you come back and see us again?
Definitely.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Well, that's wonderful. You are listening to Men's Radio Station. Coming up after the break, we will hopefully be taking more of your calls on 0203 290 4411 as we carry on this special show that is themed around addiction. We'll be meeting our next guest, Jonathan Prince, MBE, who is the founder of, or the founding trustee, I should say, of the Blue Ribbon Foundation. What is Blue Ribbon Foundation? Well, you're going to find out along with me and the rest of the team right after this.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Your call is important to us. You are now number 15 in a queue.
At Profile Insurance Services, we treat people as individuals. You'll speak to a real person, not a call centre. We're fast, small, independent, and have a superb team of insurance specialists. And they're really nice too. Advice is totally free and we cover everything. Call 0208 931 3306. Listeners to Men's Radio Station won't pay a penny for admin fees. That's 0208 931 3306. With Profile Insurance Services, you're covered.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Let me tell you about Jermyn Street Theatre. We are the smallest theatre in the West End, only 70 seats. We are a registered charity and not grant-aided, run by a small team of volunteers and trustees. Jermyn Street Theatre is a hidden gem. It combines the comfort and convenience of the West End with the intimacy of a studio. Every seat has a perfect view of the stage, and even a whisper is audible. This is a secret theatre in the heart of the West End, once found, never forgotten.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Davis. I'm the proud owner of Stout Cigars in Mayfair and Knightsbridge. For the past 60 years, we've been providing the world's best Cuban cigars. When it comes to cigars, there's no other than Stout Cigars from Mayfair and Knightsbridge. We at Stouters would like to wish Men's Radio Station every support in their task for helping men's emotional and mental well-being. Check them out. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
And it has just gone 1:30. It is still Sunday the 14th of July 2019. You are listening to Men's Radio Station. It's Phil Dave sitting in for the living legend that is Mr. Russ Kane. Alongside me we have the boy wonder producer himself, Mr. James Blake is here, and Mr. Social Media, Dennis Relojo-howell, is also here. Now, we are joined in our studio by very special guests now. The founding trustee of the Blue Ribbon Foundation. What is the Blue Ribbon Foundation? I hear you cry. Well, I believe we have the perfect guest to tell us exactly what Blue Ribbon Foundation is. Jonathan Prince is in the studio. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you.
To Men's Radio Station. We have to get it out of the way. First and foremost, what is Blue Ribbon Foundation?
I got to about 50-something, was putting on weight, and all of a sudden they say, you've got type 2 diabetes, and an awful lot of men were getting it. So I started to look at friends and discuss things with them, and then someone rang me up. I was chair of the Pink Ribbon Foundation for Breast Cancer, and said, is there anything for men a bit like that? And I looked around, and to be truthful, there are lots of wonderful charities. If you've got prostate cancer or prostate problems, there's a charity for that. If you've got heart problems, there's a charity for that, and so on and so forth. However, there's nothing that really looks at the psychology of men and the way men do health, which is very different from women.
So how do we do health?
Our main health training doesn't tend to come from parents. To be very, very basic about it, your voice changes, your balls drop, and you grow hair, and that's about it.
Still waiting for it to happen. Maybe one day. If I'm lucky.
Is that why you've got the high voice?
That's why I have the high voice still, yeah, exactly.
But in all seriousness, I mean, obviously what you refer to there is, of course, what men go through the process of what we all know as puberty. But of course, men's health is just as complex. Well, maybe not just as complex, but it certainly is complex enough. And what are the sort of signs, symptoms, behaviours that we just ignore and just take for granted as being, a bit of an off day?
Well, we're very lucky. We have this God's gift called the body, and we don't appreciate it enough. For instance, your heart beats for you about 100,000 times a day. It's pushing that 8 gallons of blood around so many times. People don't think about their prostate, their liver. They'll drink to excess, let's call it, sometimes, occasionally. Not everyone, and a lot of men... But
we have campaigns out there that say to us, look, you should only stick to a certain number of units a day, you shouldn't smoke, you shouldn't take drugs. All of these different things do
listen
exist.
To them?
I do personally, but that's primarily because I think my only vice in this world is probably taking Nurofen once in a while. So, I mean, I'm not really the kind of person that they're targeting, but... Would you say that those campaigns alone are not enough then?
Well, if I said to you, for instance, a hard statistic is the fact that any doctor will tell you that men present, that's the technical term, cancer to their doctors, often considerably later than women, because they ignore it. Because a lot of men have a sort of manana feeling when it comes to their health. Oh, I've got blood in my poo, I'll sort it out next week.
Where do you think that comes from? I don't mean the blood. I mean, where do you think that attitude comes from?
I just think it's part of, I have to say, broadly, it's part of the male DNA. There are plenty of men that look after themselves, but not enough. And as we get a family, as we get children, as we get pressure in our job, often sport stops, healthy things stop, and all of a sudden we start to grow stomachs, and so on and so forth. And anyone with a waist over 38 inches, they say, increases your likelihood of having diabetes by about 30% and having heart problems by about 30%. Not every man, but then, as I say, we have to be very general in our messages.
Well, then, Dennis, you're in terrible danger, aren't you, really? A waist over 38 inches. But anyway, right,
he has other problems. People of Asian origin are considerably more likely to get diabetes.
Yeah, actually, my dad is just 61 and he's got diabetes.
Yeah. And the prevalence, if your father has it, of you getting it is considerably increased.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that makes you feel absolutely terrific. What is curious, though, is the way that you were talking, Jonathan Prince, to anyone who's just tuned in. The way that you were speaking so openly, so candidly, it's amazing how I didn't realise how I probably am typical of the men that you talk about who doesn't like to talk about health and who doesn't really care very much for mentioning the unmentionable. Because when you're using certain language, such as finding blood in one's business, such as the process of puberty, all of these different things that you speak of, I find myself getting ever so slightly twitchy, quite uncomfortable, and I believe that that's quite normal.
And
is that people don't
typical.
Like to talk.
Yeah, people. I always, when I deliver my talks, I paraphrase it. A men's health talk in the pub. One man says to another, "Are you okay, mate?" The other man says, "Yes, I'm fine." And the first man says, "Do you want another pint then?" And that is an average male health chat.
And well, what's worrying, of course, is that the person who says, yes, I'm all right, may well not be, and then just literally let it carry on indefinitely.
And that can lead to depression, bless you,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we don't want you dying in the middle of this.
No, I was going to say I'll try and make it to at least 3 o'clock, but I can't. I'm starting to flag a bit here.
I was only talking the other day about erections. Most men will have erectile dysfunction sometime in their life. It's normal. It just goes on. But men don't like saying whatever their nickname is for their male appendage. There's trouble down below, but they need to know there is, and there's help for it.
But I suppose that the problem is that if you're surrounded by a society that doesn't like to talk about these things, how do we break that ice? How do we get people to change their attitudes?
To interject, I would say the male society doesn't like talking about these things. I think, and that's kind of what you're saying there, it's that women are a lot more open to say something is wrong, whereas men are a lot more open to say...
Oh, correct. If you hear women talking in groups, they're talking at a fundamental level.
Yeah, they're talking about, what's wrong, how am I feeling, where's my head at, whereas men, like you said, how are you? Good? Fine? Do you want another beer? That's that. So I do kind of disagree with what you're saying. I think maybe it's just the male side of the English society is a bit
Okay,
more.
all right, well, let's look at that in particular then. We'll say that we take the male society at large. You're surrounded by an inbred culture where people don't want to be honest, don't want to talk fundamentally about their personal problems, and the clue is in the word personal. It is personal to them. They don't want to be open and transparent about it. How do we change that?
Well, we have to educate them, but in what we have learnt is that you can't do it on paper. Most men will go to the internet, so we have quite a lively website, and there's a lot of help on there. We don't know how many men read the actual help but we don't produce anything printed. People say, can you send us something? And we'll say, no, we'll send you a person to talk to your men. But just sending something does, in our view, no good at all.
Well, let's explore that a bit further then. How does Blue Ribbon Foundation get its message out there?
It's tough. It really is tough. We have to raise all the money ourselves, donation and people doing stuff. Dare I say, we do quite well out of male death because people do have collections and they send it to us. So we're self-funding. So at the moment, it's social media, it's the website, and it's delivering male health talks, which we'll deliver anywhere in the country for free.
Now, what's curious is that the Blue Ribbon Foundation, one can only assume that you have a physical blue ribbon that people can wear very much in the same way that we have obviously the pink ribbon for the breast cancer campaign. Oh, look at that. Hey, look at that. I've got my blue ribbon. That's fantastic.
I have samples for you all.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. We do like it when our guests bring gifts.
And I'm going to hold up to the camera.
There you go. Thank you very much. If you're watching on Facebook now, there you go. Producer James is holding up for you a blue ribbon that you'll be able to see very clearly there. Now, that's all well and great, but I have a concern. And my concern is that you see people very openly and very publicly wearing pink ribbons, but I don't think I've ever seen one of these blue ribbons.
No, it's very early days. It's hard work doing what we're trying to do. And, of course, we started off, launched in Parliament, and thought this is going to be great, and realised it's a real tough challenge to get the message out there. But we're learning and we're growing and we've got more interest. I just did an article recently from a doctor that wrote a very funny article for the website about the dreaded anal examination for prostate. And so things are moving, but it is tough. End of story.
Well, it's sorry to interrupt, but I find it's the sort of the reason this radio station was set up, and it's our strapline. It's where men really talk, and I find that's the real problem with the male mental health is that we're not quite there yet, are we? We're not quite talking enough about it.
Interestingly enough, I know the royal family got behind mental health, and then our Prime Minister for the next couple of days announced more money. But actually, in terms of mental health, there's nowhere near the amount of money given to it than there is to all the other parts of health.
But what's the balance here that we're looking at? I mean, how much of the problem is money? How much of the problem is attitude?
Oh, now that's a question.
Well, I don't like to ask the small questions. I don't want to ask the small questions here. What's the point of that? That's not going to be a very long conversation. No, but I appreciate that is quite a big ask, and at the same time, I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't necessarily have statistics in front of you. But I'm talking about from your personal experience. You're obviously quite entrenched in this work, and great work it is as well. And in your personal experience, what have you seen as being the problems? Would you say that the problem is more geared towards a lack of funding, or would you say it's more geared towards a terrible attitude, or is it both in equal measure?
Well, all I can tell you, statistically, there's 22% more times funding for cancer than there is for mental health. But also, particularly for men, because you know the statistics on 3/4 of the people that take their lives are men, also men don't talk about it. So there's more than one aspect.
But equally at the same time, and statistically speaking, then we look at the statistics for those who are to be affected by cancer. They now reckon that is possibly 1 in 3, if not 1 in 2.
1 in 2 soon to be.
Yeah,
but much more livable with.
And whereas with mental health, the statistics of that, is that about 1 in 3, 1 in 4?
What, men?
Or just generally?
It's a small number that take their life.
No, but what I mean is, in particular,
in the UK,
who are affected by mental health problems, I believe, isn't it something like the statistics is about 1 in 3, 1 in 4. So if that is the case, then it's almost understandable why there would be more funding for something like cancer.
Well, I think Mental Health magazine polled 15,000 readers, which is not a bad sample, and 56% of respondents admitted to having suicidal thoughts. Now, okay, they're reading the magazine because there's a commonality. But nevertheless, we're looking at that level when it comes to mental health.
I suppose what I'm getting at, and I don't want to sort of sound as if I'm trying to justify why there is not as much money spent on mental health, because in my humble opinion, you could probably never throw too much money, too much governmental money at people's health and well-being, because it is fundamentally what will drive our society forward. You know, if we have as many people as possible who are in a fit and a healthy state as they can possibly be, well, then it stands to reason that society will thrive, is because people will have less important things on their mind, and therefore they can contribute to society in a way that will mean that we thrive as a country.
Yeah, and I'm 100% with you on that. I think the thing is that if you look at the fact that every 90 minutes in the UK someone takes their life, and they estimate that each suicide costs 1.5 million. I'm quoting statistics again. It just gives you an idea of the problem. So they need to up the amount of money being spent on mental health. And what I'm not, when I talk mental health, in the main, I'm not talking madness. I'm just talking about someone, a normal person, life starts to go a bit wrong, and they get a bit depressed, and that spiral starts, and then it gets worse, and then it gets to a point, particularly as we know, younger men under the age of about 50 start saying, what's life all about? And is it worth it? And you see there's more students, more people in university, more young men taking their lives.
I can't remember what it was, but I saw a stat the other day, and it was men under 50. I think it was something like 34% of men under 50 generally find themselves asking, what is my purpose in life? Which I think is a heavy question.
I was reading an article, so this is not my thinking, that was talking about 40 years ago, men knew their place. They were the breadwinner. The wife in the main stayed at home, or if she had a career, it was a different sort of career. Nowadays, there are a lot of young men querying their place, and I think that doesn't help in the mix generally. But it's a difficult one because one has to be so politically correct nowadays, and I don't know whether that comes into it or not. But anyway, I've said it.
I think that what a man is as well has changed. It's not like it is 40 years ago. You're not just the primary breadwinner anymore. But then what does that mean for your male image, Is it...
It does seem to be fascinating, though, that if you were to use an example of 40, 50, 60 years ago where life did appear at surface value to be simpler, and by that I mean that there weren't as many questions asked about so many different types of subjects, whether it was men didn't necessarily ask about their image, and equally I don't think women necessarily did as well. I sort of said it flippantly earlier on in this programme, but I kind of meant it as well, is that I don't believe that really the choice anyone had in terms of changing their image was much more than just getting a new hairdo. I say it flippantly, but I actually sort of mean it as well, is that now there is much more choice. People overanalyze things a lot more as well. In particular, we have access online to so many more bits of medical information that could really play havoc with people's way of thinking as to whether or not they believe they have some sort of condition, whether or not they believe that there is something dramatically wrong with them. Whereas before, we'd only ever go to the doctor. If we had a problem, we'd make an appointment, we'd rely on the doctor to tell us there is something not right. It goes beyond that. It goes to the extent where if, as you refer to as well, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it was wrong, but if primarily people realised that women had certain jobs and men had certain jobs, please no letters, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just saying it seemed at surface value to be a much simpler life then. With all of that in mind, when life was, quote, simpler, we didn't necessarily appear, at surface value anyway, to have quite the same number of problems we do now. Could it be that people's minds are so blown with all of the ways they have to think in this day and age that that could be a large contributing factor?
Do you know what? I can't answer that.
Oh, come on, I put effort into that question. What do you mean you can't
That was a
answer
very
that,
long question.
for crying out loud. That took nearly half the programme and
Yes,
you can't answer it.
I think I would personally agree, but I'm not a doctor. I couldn't, or a statistician. I couldn't give you hard facts, but I certainly believe that there are lots of younger men. When it comes to the makeup thing, you only have to go back 200 years. Men were making themselves up wearing wigs.
Yeah.
So it's not that. But it all changed post-war. There was that austerity period, and men were just men, and so I'd look at a shorter period and just say, post-Second World War, what's happened. And of course, the other thing is, everything is online. The knowledge that we have to have nowadays is so much more detailed.
And of course, we don't have the same knowledge that medical professionals do have. So it's very simple for us to turn to, we sort of flippantly call it Dr. Google. Of course, this is by no way blaming Google as a search engine or an organization. People just happen to use it quite a lot for this reason. But if people do turn to, quote, Dr. Google, then it's almost denigrating the very hard work and effort that medical professionals have to go through for years. Because if it really was that simple that we could self-diagnose ourselves, would you really think medical professionals would go through their processes for 7+ years, learning their craft and actually forever developing their craft? They don't know it all from 7 years. There's
well, yes,
way
because
more.
The sorts of things that men have to identify are relatively simple, and then the things men have to do to look after themselves. People say to me, well, what can I do? And I say everything from stop drinking fizzy drinks with loads of sugar in to start drinking water, and do you know the good properties of water, through to just a bit of exercise. Because when you look at what men need to do, it's relatively simple. When it comes to general health, when it comes to specific health, if you're going to get cancer, you may get cancer, but you can minimise the chance of you getting cancer by being healthy.
You see, we also need to explore the simplicity element a bit further because, of course, if you look a bit deeper, then simplicity comes in the form of the food and the drink that we used to eat how many years ago.
I also want to add into that, I also think simplicity in the workplace as well.
Absolutely. That was definitely getting on to my next point as well, because if you look at the food and the drink, well, more often than not, people did just used to have to put up with water because there wasn't all the choice that's available now. Vending machines, I mean, I have a real bugbear with vending machines, genuinely I do, because it means that rubbish is readily available, and I have a major issue with that. As in the past, if you had to pop into a shop and maybe you didn't have time to do that by queuing up and purchasing something that was unhealthy, now if you have it at the touch of a button and it is readily available, what are you going to do? You're not going to say to yourself, oh, I don't have time to go to the vending machine. No, you do. You put in your money, and what comes out? Normally fizzy drinks laced with sugar, very unhealthy and frankly revolting for you. You look at something like that, you look at also that the fact that because our workload has increased so dramatically over the last X number of decades, that subsequently people aren't looking after them in terms of what they eat anymore. They'll have their food, we were talking about it on another radio station I work at this week, just gone. Al desco is the expression. In other words, they don't stop, they don't have a break, they don't have lunch, a proper lunch at that. They'll maybe have something that's fast and, quote, convenient, not necessarily healthy, but they'll sit at their desk and they'll eat it. They won't take a proper lunch break. Then, of course, when it comes to getting home in the evening, you won't make yourself a proper healthy meal anymore. You're just going to take that something that takes a little bit of piercing in the film, shove it in the microwave, and off you go, and it's done in 3 minutes. That is laced with salt, that's laced with preservatives. It's revolting. It is not good for you. all of these different elements, it cannot be a coincidence that health is really suffering as a result of
Oh,
it.
no, you're totally right. And people are recognising it. But recognising it and doing something about it is quite different. And life is fast, and ready meals and all of the other sorts of things are easy. So, there's that whole situation where people say, well, I don't want to go back to how it was. I want easy. I want this. But I think we're moving slowly. We're starting to see supermarkets having vegetables not in plastic. As someone said, they come in plastic. As long as it's degradable, I can buy the salad and throw it away without eating it.
Well, quite. But at the same time...
Yeah, well, that's an interesting fact. I've got another
it's a
one
theory
for you.
I'll give you that.
A couple of stats, because I don't know how much longer we've got. Did you know that men are twice as likely as women to be dead by the time they're 65?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Twice
That's
as likely as women.
But, I mean,
that's terrifying, though.
Yeah.
But especially if we've still got access to the same food and drink and the other lifestyle choices I was just referring to. It's still curious that that's the case.
Yeah, and I was reading the other day, I can't quote the statistic, but something like, so one in 5 men will die before the age of 65. There's 4 in the room, so I'm glad the person who's not in the room is going to be the person who dies early. Yeah. And we're 1.5 times more likely than women to die from heart disease, cancer, breathing problems. It comes back to this fact of men don't or aren't, or a lot of men, I say, aren't doing health. We leave it too late. We're a manana men, if you like.
Right, so in that case, Jonathan Prince, MBE, what do we as men need to be doing to help ourselves and possibly help others help themselves as well?
One, we need to understand our body. So, for instance, when I'm delivering a talk on prostate, and as you know, it's 1 in 8 at the moment, men, they're older men, and I say, do you know where your prostate is?
Quick one, do we know where it is?
I have reason to believe I know where prostate is, yes.
Yes, cool. You might get, if you'll excuse the French...
towards the middle of the body, should we say.
Yeah. No, you excuse the French, they'll say sort of up your bum. They know why.
Yeah.
Yeah? Do you know what your prostate does?
Yes, I do.
Ah, what does it do?
Well, do you know what it does? Phil? Mr. Phil Dave? Mr. Dennis?
Honestly, I don't.
No, I believe that I'm going to make a fool of myself, so I'm going to say no. I don't know.
It's the part of your body that differentiates between urine and...
No.
No?
No.
No?
Yes.
No?
No.
This is over.
Yes, that's it. It produces a fluid that mixes with your semen, that when you ejaculate, the fluid actually helps the semen to get where it goes and looks after it. It's called prostatic fluid, the final thing. And the PSA, which is a chemical inside it, makes thickened semen runnier, helping the sperm travel through more easily, increasing the likelihood of successful fertilization. And I'll tell you one other interesting fact I didn't know, I bet you didn't know. When you ejaculate, it ejaculates at approximately 28 miles an hour.
Good Lord, well, there you go.
So at least it's under the speed limit.
So I was going to say, you don't have to, well, I don't know, unless you're in Camden, then maybe not. So unless you haven't noticed that Camden seems to have changed to 20 miles an hour. Anyway, I don't know how the heck we got into that, I'm sure. Well, we are sort of running out of time for this particular section, but Jonathan Prince, you're very welcome to stick around because our next guest is equally as fascinating. We're going to very shortly be speaking to David Charkham, who's an actor, and he also is the man who ultimately helped Ozzy Osbourne on the road to recovery.
And several others, by the way.
And several others. I was going to say, Ozzy Osbourne's possibly one of his more famous clients, but even so, he has helped several other people. We're going to find out more about him. We'll find out more about the work he does. Are you able to stick around? Because we'd love it if you could.
For a short while, yes, happy to.
Excellent. Well, in which case, we'll also hear more from Jonathan Prince as well. And you are listening to Men's Radio Station. A reminder that if you would like to get in contact about any of the subjects we have been speaking about today, then you are most welcome to do so. We would love it if you would phone up, call us on 0203 290 4411. You heard Fenella in Whetstone do it earlier on. It's very straightforward. It's very easy. Men really do talk here at Men's Radio Station, and we hope that you'll be one of them. We will be back with you right after this.
You're listening to Men Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Your call is important to us. You are now number 15 in a queue.
At Profile Insurance Services, we treat people as individuals. You'll speak to a real person, not a call centre. We're fast, small, independent, and have a superb team of insurance specialists. And they're really nice too. Advice is totally free and we cover everything. Call 0208 931 3306. Listeners to Men's Radio Station won't pay a penny for admin fees. That's 0208 931 3306. With Profile Insurance Services, you're covered.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Let me tell you about Jermyn Street Theatre. We are the smallest theatre in the West End, only 70 seats. We are a registered charity and not grant-aided, run by a small team of volunteers and trustees. Jermyn Street Theatre is a hidden gem. It combines the comfort and convenience of the West End with the intimacy of a studio. Every seat has a perfect view of the stage, and even a whisper is audible. This is a secret theatre in the heart of the West End, once found, never forgotten.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Davis. I'm the proud owner of South Cigars in Mayfair and Knightsbridge. For the past 60 years, we've been providing the world's best Cuban cigars. When it comes to cigars, there's no other than South Cigars from Mayfair and Knightsbridge. We at Southers would like to wish Men's Radio Station every support in their task for helping men's emotional and mental well-being. Check them out. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men Radio Station, where men really talk.
And bang, just like that, we enter into the final hour of this afternoon's programme here on Men's Radio Station. Phil Dave sitting in the hot seat in for Russ Kane with you until 3 o'clock this afternoon, and the studio is looking increasingly busy. We must go through everyone, but still in the studio, still pressing the buttons, we have Boy Wonder producer himself, James Blake, also known as the Finger on the Feed. And is it the Finger on the Feed? Yes, I think that's what we said.
I like Finger on the Feed.
Finger on the Feed. Very good. There you go. So just in case you're looking at us on Facebook and you can see this finger pointing out at the corner of the screen, that would be Mr. James Blake's finger. We also have Mr. Social Media himself. Dennis Relojo-Howell is also in the studio. We are still joined in the studio by our guest Jonathan Prince, who's the founding trustee of the Blue Ribbon Foundation. And now, just to throw another name and another person into the mix, we're joined by our next guest, David Charkham, who's an actor and a recovery coach, who probably amongst his most famous clients was Ozzy Osbourne. Or maybe he is Ozzy Osbourne, I don't know. He may still be, for all I know. But welcome, David. We're going to talk a little bit about the work that you do in just a moment's time. But Jonathan is still here, and before the break, we were hearing some marvellous suggestions. Thank you very much to Lady B, who's just bought me a green tea. That's marvellous. We were hearing some superb suggestions as to what men could and should be doing in a bid to try and help themselves to be better aware of what they need to do to look after their health. And I don't know whether or not we necessarily finished going through what people should be doing, but how do people be more aware? How do men become more aware about looking after themselves?
Well, it is a matter of education, as I said before. We've just got to get the messages out there. Schools, early age. It is happening. The National Health Service is beginning at last to realise that the best way to keep to budget is by stopping an awful lot of this stuff happening. So, for instance, diabetes now takes 10% of the NHS budget. Most of that is the outcome of diabetes, blindness, amputation. People don't even realise what not looking after their blood sugars will do in the long term.
Sorry to interrupt. I think it's funny as well. I think maybe even diabetes could be caused by mental health issues, because if you're very depressed, you're going to drink more, and there's lots of sugar in alcohol, isn't there, which then leads to diabetes, which then leads to these problems. So.
It might be, although it's about your pancreas not doing the right thing. That's what it comes from. And so it's all about blood sugar levels. But you see, ultimately, if it's not working properly, it kills nerves. And once nerves start getting killed, whether they're in your eyes or in your feet, it's the largest statistic, I believe, for lower limb amputation for diabetics.
No, wow.
Not huge, but as I say, it's taking 10% of the NHS budget now, diabetes. Just getting more fact out to men about looking after that themselves would save a lot of money. And a lot of angst for those men.
Yeah. You just mentioned about awareness. I guess fundamentally the purpose of these blue ribbons that you gave us is about raising awareness. Now, I'm just curious, like, because for pink ribbon, I don't know where it's supposed to be worn, like September, October, and then red ribbon.
It's more an annual thing now.
An annual thing. So.
But yes, Breast Cancer Awareness Month is October, whereas Men's Month really is July, although Movember also is quite high.
So is that the month that you particularly encourage
although we
people
don't want men just to do it for 2 months of the year. We want men to just slowly change their lifestyle. Nothing major. Just be aware of their diet, a bit more exercise. I love a fry up, but now it's occasional. I used to eat on the go, but now I'm very much aware even if I take 10 minutes walk at lunchtime, just to do something different, just to ease myself, my brain, very important. So it's nothing major.
Excellent. Well, where can people find more information about Blue Ribbon? What do they need to do?
www.blueribbonfoundation.org, or please follow me every day. I put something out on Facebook, just a little smiley reminder, or maybe something to make men think, on facebook.com New Blue Ribbon Foundation.
Okay, if I may just quickly mention about that, about your URL, I think people might confuse it with an American website, which is quite similar. So I think yours end in .org.uk, because the one that ends in .org, I don't think it's quite related.
.org.uk.
Yeah, I don't think the .org is related to.
And for older people, there was apparently a Blue Ribbon chocolate bar.
Exactly.
Don't confuse it with that either.
Oh, I remember Blue Ribbon as well. I don't think it's for old people. I definitely remember Blue Ribbon chocolate bars. Anyway.
Well, in that case, you're older than you look.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll take that as a compliment. That's good. That's very good. Why, how old do I look, out of curiosity? You can say, I don't mind. I'm
not saying what.
What?
32?
Spot on, sir. Look at that. Fantastic. There we go.
Good skills.
On that happy note. Must take that oil of Olay back for a refund. Anyway, on that happy note, let us speak to our next guest. Now, I would like to start this with a question. Now that you've stopped, how do you stay stopped? Well, hopefully the person to answer that very question is David Charkham, who joins us in the studio now, live on Men's Radio Station this Sunday afternoon. David, welcome to Men's Radio Station. Thank you very much indeed for taking time out to come and see us. And I suppose that we should start with a bit of background as to who you are and what you do, because we've mentioned that you are an actor and a recovery coach. Actor, well, maybe that speaks for itself. We might find out a bit more about that in just a bit. But let's look in particular at what does a recovery coach actually do?
Good afternoon. What is a recovery coach? Well, the background really is all of the things that have happened to me over the last 30 years and the experience and the program that I developed about 28 years ago that was picked up by the NHS were based on my own experiences. As I became a successful child actor at 15 and a half, I did all sorts of very varied work in England and America, on films and television in the West End. And in 86, I ended up in a rehab centre, completely broken. And I had fantasies. I went through the detox. I went through the program. I was ready. It worked because I was ready, and I think that may have been talked about today. These programs work when you're able to put both hands up, not just one and a half hands. And I came out with all sorts of fantasies and illusions that just because I cleaned up my act, everything would come back to me. And nothing happened at all in terms of my career. It was really frustrating. I couldn't understand. I was doing the right things. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't taking drugs. Where's my career? It wouldn't come back. And then I was supported by a wonderful man, an actor who passed away some time ago this year, called Dudley Sutton, who was a great mentor for me. And he saw me in the street one day being very frustrated. The only work I could get was as a film extra, and people would be coming up to me and saying hello, who I'd known as, I don't know, assistant stage managers maybe 17 years ago. They were the producer, and so on and so forth. And it was very difficult. It was very humbling. And he said the most extraordinary thing to me. I said, Dudley, I don't get it. I'm a good boy now. I'm ready. I've cleaned up my act. I'm squeaky clean. And you know what he said to me? He said, David, have you ever considered that your higher power might have other plans for you than you could possibly understand today? Well, he told me that 30 years ago. And within 2 weeks of that conversation, they opened the first men's halfway house for men coming out of rehab. It is a shock. When you've been in rehab, wherever it is, you're in a bubble. And a lot of us need to be in a bubble. But when you come back to reality, it slaps you around the face, and you don't have your anaesthetic. So you come out and you're raw.
And also you don't have that guiding light around you. When one is in rehabilitation, you are surrounded by professionals who have the way of pointing you in the right direction and there to help you every step of the way, and suddenly you're almost out on the street, as it were.
You're on your own, but I was suggested that I went to support groups, and I got plugged into the support self-help groups, and that was the difference. That helped me, and that kept me clean and sober, but it didn't get the career back. So Dudley made this extraordinary suggestion and statement, and then I found myself in front of a group of men who'd just come out of rehab, quite nervous and angry, and I'm thinking, because I've not educated, everything I've done I've created myself, and they're looking at me expecting me, I don't know what they're expecting me to do, but I suddenly remembered, what would I have liked someone to talk to me about the day before I was going to let out back into the real wide world. It was just about talking about practical stuff, avoiding isolation, remembering to ask for help, plugging into the support groups, and so on and so on. And that seed, that group then developed, and the City of Westminster were desperate because of the addicts and alcoholics in the City of Westminster. It was becoming uncontrollable and uncontainable. And they'd done lots of projects, very expensive projects, for Say No to Drugs campaign. And as far as I recall, it was a while ago, I think they spent an awful lot of money on hanging yellow ribbons on lampposts and getting personalities to go to schools and give out badges, Say No to Drugs. Well, I remember that yellow ribbon. It didn't really work. And also the AIDS experience.
Primarily because I thought it was someone playing a prank. I actually did not know what that campaign was.
And you were, how old were you when you saw it?
Oh, I don't remember the exact age. I know it wasn't that long ago. I'm sure of it. But
the point is, that didn't work. And also at that time, it was the HIV explosion, and the discovery, stunning to think about it now, was that addicts can get HIV. It's not just a gay plague. I mean, there was a lot of unknown stuff and developing stuff. So those campaigns didn't work, but they formed a committee of the sort of head honchos in Westminster, and I wrote to them because there was just something in the local library saying we need support to help addicts and alcoholics. I wrote to them, told them what I was doing, and within 24 hours they came to see me. They knew much more than I knew, i.e. I didn't know what I had. I didn't know that I thought of something surprisingly enough no one has thought of: practical communication skills and non-judgmental support. They say, these are where the addicts are, St Mary's, Paddington, go along, you talk to the team, and if they think there's hope, we'll back you, we'll fund you for 3 months. So that's how it started, and after 6 months some of the addicts from the streets were starting to accept that they could go into rehab, and that there was hope, because you lose all hope when you're in the straitjacket of addiction. But what they said to me, they said, David, well, it's all right to be funded by Westminster, but you're working in a hospital, and they had to put me under administrative and clerical, so I had to be like a secretary because I wasn't a medic. And an extraordinary thing happened. They wanted to keep me, and what they did is they created a post just for me in the NHS.
Well, that must scream volumes in itself.
Well, yeah, I know a lot more. I can understand and appreciate this stuff now, but it just was kind of whirlwind. And that started, and I retired. I did 20 years with them.
Well, when you're in the thick of it, sorry, because let's go back a little bit to your personal experiences. Yeah. You said when you are, quote, in the straitjacket of addiction. That is, to me, one of the most powerful sentences that's come out of today's programme, because people don't recognise the hold addiction can and normally does have over an individual. You hear the word addiction, and more often than not, you'd be forgiven for thinking that people would just say, just snap out of it. What is the hold? Describe that hold.
Right, okay, because I got, why don't you pull your socks up? I also got, if you had a proper job, you wouldn't be an addict, because, showbiz. What is it? Well, it's physical, it's spiritual, and it's mental. It's threefold. And it eats away. And for a lot of people, the perception of an addict, or certainly used to be, how can I be an alcoholic if I'm not a down and out living on the street? The perception of someone with a job, with a career, with a family, holding or keeping those balls in the air, they could be an addict as well. But I didn't understand. I thought I had a car, so I couldn't be a drug addict. And I still had a flat, so I definitely couldn't be an alcoholic.
So it sort of begs the question, what does an addict look like?
Exactly. What does an addict look like? And that's a whole other lecture and workshop. But what is it like? What is it?
Tongue-in-cheek there.
Yeah, but you're right. There's a lot, because I did attend a lecture from a psychiatrist, and he just showed a slide of some regular people walking past St Paul's and some tramps on the stairs. He said, "Who's the addict?" And it actually wasn't the tramp. It was somebody looking perfectly respectable who was addicted to pain pills. So what is it like? You lose everything. It's a health issue, of course, but it's your self-worth. And by the time I got into rehab, and I had this, I never know how strange this sounds, but when I got into rehab, and you do the process and you do your life story, and it's very powerful and scary, I didn't even know I'd been successful. As I said, I don't know how wacky that sounds, but I got thrown out of school at 15 and a half, I'm on the West End stage, and the next thing I know, it's 1972, and I'm in Jesus Christ Superstar. And the drink and the drugs became more attractive than my career. So what, in my...
When do you think that particular path came up in front of you? Was it the people that you were mixing with? Was it that you thought... All right, be honest, was it that you were maybe a bit cocky about it and you thought to yourself, okay, well, I'm obviously sort of incredibly successful at quite a young age, I can do whatever the hell I like?
It's a very good question. I had no idea I was successful. I didn't know that it wasn't normal for me to go in to do West End shows at night, and my office hours were 7 till 10:30, and my office was the Shaftesbury Theatre, and I would go out. I was a kid, and I would party and do whatever I did, and I would come home 6:30 in the morning, and I would I might have a cup of tea as my parents were having breakfast and they were going to work, and I was going to bed. It wasn't strange, because it was the only life that I knew. But this thing of when...
And your parents didn't highlight it as being unusual?
My parents were unbelievably supportive, because they tried...
Was that to your detriment?
Good question. Good question. There's not enough time to answer that in the depth that it's owed. But they were loving, I think, for me, I think my parents were loving. They just wanted to get me an education. That's what they wanted. Not all, that's what they wanted. And they desperately tried to get me into schools. I'm fortunate because I can now say, and I'm 71 now, so I've been around the block once or twice, I'm rather delighted that no public school would accept me. That was my journey. No one would accept me. And I'm 14, and they had to take, and they were desperate, and they loved me. So they took me, and I remember this is in the 60s, they took me to a child psychologist. And there weren't a lot covering that field. So they gave me an IQ test, and they said basically that your son, he's pretty bright, but surprise, surprise, he's got a problem with authority. And then this woman said, I've still got the letter typed very badly. Not that she wrote badly, but there was, heavier notes on some of the letters. I've kept it. It was on like tissue paper. She said, there's only one school that will understand your boy. And I went off to, I call it an audition, an interview with St Christopher's boarding school in Hertfordshire that was Quaker run, vegetarian, and all very, very alternative. No school uniforms, call the teachers by the first names. And that kind of suited me. But I had to go off, something I don't hear much about. Before they'd accept me, I had to go off to be crammed. I don't know if you know what crammers are. Well, crammers are like, they put 6 kids in a class and they cram, a bit like battery hens, they cram information into you. They try and force information into you to get up to a certain standard. I can't remember a word of it, but I was crammed and then I was accepted. And the beauty of St Christopher's, they could understand kids. Some they could guide into an education, academic life. Others, if they saw something artistic, they'd almost give you permission, and they gave me permission to perform, or I might say show off, because people say, well, are you an actor? Now I've been around and worked in the world of therapy for so long, it might not be the roar of the crowd and the smell of the grease paint. I just wanted your attention.
Well, I was going to say,
I just wanted you to like me.
Isn't that often what they say, is that those who are performers are usually just crying out for attention?
Well, I wanted it.
I should know. I'm a performer in my own.
There you go. It takes one to know one. But I now remember tugging that my parents would be at home with guests and they'd be at dinner. And I'd be, what was I, 6, 7? And I'd be tugging, come over here, I've got to play. Come over here, come and I insisted you watch me perform.
But I bet you were never deprived of attention, though. You cried out for it.
Maybe, what can I say? I was really, was it good? I don't know. Look, I made it, and I went through that, and it didn't. Did it turn my head? No, I'll tell you what happened. I'm 16, it's the 60s. Now, one thing that isn't talked about much, I'm the first generation of Englishmen that didn't go into national service. It's hard to believe, a long time ago, but every man up until 60, I'm sure one of your listeners will tell us, went to military. They did military service for 2 or 3 years. And it's when that stopped, it correlates with the explosion of music, of fashion, of the Beatles, of the style, of Mary Quant, of Carnaby Street. And the youth were listened to for the first time.
63, apparently.
Thank you very much. The power of the internet. So it's 63. So that's around the time I was in that school, and I wasn't able to, and I wasn't interested in an academic education. But they had an opera society. They had a music society. I could play the drums, so I joined something called a trad jazz band, and I just did my thing, and people liked it, and I felt comfortable.
Was that being excused from military? I say being excused as if you had special permission, but was the change in law where your generation did not have to do military service? Was that almost a license to do whatever the heck you wanted?
Good question. Well, looking back, yes, maybe, but it was a very different world, It reminds me of this change in law that had such an impact, because I was very fortunate to be later on in 70 in the show called Hair. And that, again, the whole thing pivoted on something called the Lord Chamberlain's office. And believe it or not, up till 1969, I think, the Lord Chamberlain's office had to look at every single script of every performance that was going to be shown in the West End. And literally, this civil servant would go through it, and he'd pick up the script. And there's an old name, something a bit risque, called a blue joke. And the reason it's called a blue joke is because the Lord Chamberlain had a blue pencil, and if he didn't like it, not even just verbally, if it was a movement that was suggestive, the blue pencil would come through. So I was around when that changed, and then my experience of the theatre, and then anything could be performed. Anyway, long answer to a short question. Sorry, where were we?
Well, I tell you where I want to go next.
Okay.
Is I would like to know very much sort of at what point you realised that having gone through everything you went through and you entered the world of rehabilitation and came out the other side, and you've said very openly, very honestly, you didn't realise that you had success under your belts, that it was just the addiction was the overriding factor in everything that you did and you said and you wanted to achieve, as it were. What is it in your life that made you flick that switch of thinking, I now need to help, I'm better now, I need to help others get the same?
Well, I continue to be getting better. Number one, and two, there was no conscious decision when it's time to help others. It evolved. It evolved by that suggestion of going to that men's halfway house. It evolved when I found myself working with street addicts that were causing lots of problems to the official kind of medical world. And I think probably when the first three of these hardliners went into a rehab program and put the drink and the drugs down and rejoin the human race, I think probably subconsciously or something, you know what, David, you got something here. And certainly the authorities recognised it, hence they created the journey. And that's what I did. It was just what I did.
You just found your calling almost.
Yeah, I did, but it's not, I don't, yeah.
Is it too strong a word to say you had an epiphany, as it were?
Well, no, I didn't.
A very slow one.
The only white lights I got was when I used to take acid in the 60s. Actually, there was no blinding light.
Not that we condone that here.
Not that I would condone it at all. But no, but I've had an extraordinary career. The great thing for me that kept me fresh with the National Health, that's when I got into this recovery coaching, which the words weren't used years and years ago. Basically, what had happened, they knew I'd had a history of showbiz, and I think the managers of some of these artists would think, well, this guy's not going to go over the top if he's travelling the world in great, luxury and all that stuff. And I have no illusions about a bit of fame rubbing off on me anymore. And sometimes that kind of superstardom and the dust that falls from the artist can affect people. And I've seen it, because if I was to write my second book, I haven't written my first book yet, but the second book would be, my main interest is the mood-altering effect of fame.
Do you think then, with that in mind, that the known effects that fame and the pressures of can have on an individual, are those who are in the limelight more likely, more susceptible to going down that dark path of addiction?
That's a good question, because I used to...
I'm getting a lot of ticks here. I'm getting
okay. I'm not,
it's almost like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. I'm sure you do.
Two cups of tea next week. Maybe a
how
raise.
many bodies?
But it's an important question, because I was in rehab and I'm going to the counsellors. Well, it's all right for you. I'm an actor. I can't not drink. And they said to me, David, did you know there were actors in recovery? And over a period of 3 years, when I worked for one of the major hospital mental health private chains, I took a list of the occupation of everyone I saw for 3 years. And there was some showbiz, but there was every single walk of life there. So it's not, people say, well, it's the limelight, but it's not necessarily showbiz. However, if you live in a bubble like some artists, there's only one that I name because those ones have chosen to talk about me, and there's lots of others it's not professional, I wouldn't be talking about. But what I've witnessed, if you see someone who's been a star and loved and adored from 15 years old, and they step into a bubble where they're surrounded by a group of people who are never going to say, you're a plonker, or stronger words than that, or
you're wrong, right? Yeah.
Or you're wrong, because they're still... And that's where I saw this detachment of reality. Are you waving that
do you know what? We are going to explore this further in just a short moment's time. But I would like to remind anyone who is out there listening that you are listening to Men's Radio Station. And if you would like to get involved in this very frank and very open conversation, as we usually do here on Men's Radio Station, about addiction, however addiction has affected you, if at all, maybe it's affected other people that you know, we would love it if you would be daring enough and brave enough to share your experiences of addiction with us. Call us on 0203 290-4411. That's 0203-290-4411. You can also go to our social media pages. We are on facebook.com/Men's Radio STN, and we are also on Twitter and Instagram at Men's Radio STN. Please do be honest, be open, join in the discussion, join in the conversation. If you are feeling daring enough, you don't have to give your real name. You can remain anonymous. We'd love to hear from you, though. We'd love for you to join in and to share your experiences. We will be speaking more to our very special guests in the form of Mr. David Charkham right after these wise words.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Your call is important to us. You are now number 15 in a queue.
At Profile Insurance Services, we treat people as individuals. You'll speak to a real person, not a call centre. We're fast, small, independent, and have a superb team of insurance specialists. And they're really nice too. Advice is totally free and we cover everything. Call 0208 931 3306. Listeners to Men's Radio Station won't pay a penny for admin fees. That's 0208 931 3306. With Profile Insurance Services, you're covered.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30pm on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Let me tell you about Jermyn Street Theatre. We are the smallest theatre in the West End, only 70 seats. We are a registered charity and not grant-aided, run by a small team of volunteers and trustees. Jermyn Street Theatre is a hidden gem. It combines the comfort and convenience of the West End with the intimacy of a studio. Every seat has a perfect view of the stage, and even a whisper is audible. This is a secret theatre in the heart of the West End, once found, never forgotten.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Davis. I'm the proud owner of Stoughton Cigars in Mayfair and Knightsbridge. For the past 60 years, we've been providing the world's best Cuban cigars. When it comes to cigars, there's no other than Stoughton Cigars from Mayfair and Knightsbridge. We at Stoughtons would like to wish Men's Radio Station every support in their task for helping men's emotional and mental well-being. Check them out. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Indeed, they really do talk here at Men's Radio Station. You are listening to Men's Radio Station on a Sunday with Phil Dave in for Russ Kane. We have half an hour left. My goodness me, this show is absolutely flying by today. You are listening to Men's Radio Station with Phil Dave in for Russ Kane. We have Boy Wonder producer James Blake is still here. We also have Mr. Social Media Dennis Relojo-howell. But we also have our guest, our very special guest, David Charkham, who is telling us his fascinating background. But now we want to chat a little more, I suppose, about the work that you do. Now, I know that you are an ambassador for a rehabilitation centre based in Thailand, is that right? Mm-hmm. So perhaps you just tell us a little bit about what that entails and why you are, how you ended up there.
I'm an ambassador, UK ambassador for the Cabin Group Chiang Mai. I've always been fond of Thailand and the Thai people and the Thai ethos and the Buddhism, and have been involved with various support networks over there. But I chose to be involved with the Cabin because it's I go out and I lecture there. It covers It's there for everybody, from every kind of nation. I mean, it's a men's rehab, there's a women's rehab, there's a young men's rehab, all under the same umbrella. And they're on the ball because they have their finger on the pulse of these burgeoning addictions, i.e. they've just opened a program on gambling, they just opened a program for young people with gaming, they just opened their first LBGT centre, and they've just about to open something called the Salam Centre. That's for Arabic clients. So over the years, I've visited many treatment centres, but I feel very comfortable working with this project. And importantly for me, they have a hospital on site.
That's cool. We actually we spoke to Cameron Dare.
Cam Adair, the brilliant young Cam Adair.
Yeah, Cam Adair. Yeah, he came and spoke to us about gaming addiction, which was fascinating indeed.
It was absolutely fascinating.
That's a burgeoning thing. Can I just mention one other thing?
Please, feel free.
Eminence grise. I think someone will have to Google that to know what that is. But I'm the background boy of a fantastic charity called the Outside Edge Theatre Company. I've worked with them lovingly for the last 20 years, and it's a charity, no fees are involved, and it is set up for anyone coming out of any kind of rehabilitation to come down to a drop-in to see if they're interested in developing a path to the arts.
Now, actor and recovery coach David Charkham, one thing I have to ask you, all of this work sounds amazing, but it also sounds like you're probably best placed to answer the following, is how does someone know if they are addicted to something?
Oh, good question, Phil.
I was going to say good question, but I've given him enough compliments.
Compliments.
It's a great question because my experience, and certainly the experience of a lot of people that I work with, it's their loved ones that see it before they do. How does one know? I guess I had that moment of clarity, or the gift of desperation. When I had that moment of gift of desperation, when I was not prepared to say, yeah, I hear you, and I'll take a few days off. Or when I went to a doctor who said, David, you'll be fine, just take some antibiotics, you've got a bug. Okay, and I'm walking out of the door, and the doctor goes, oh, by the way, you can't drink for 10 days. And as I left that surgery, I thought, hold on a second. What do you mean, not drink for 10 days? And I went through a process, and then I thought, who do I know that doesn't drink? Because at the end of my addiction, the only people I had anything in common with was other addicts. So how do you know? I think when I got to a point to ask for help, and it was Lionel Barr, actually, that guided me to rehab. Of all the people who I used to get high with when I was a kid, and I saw him go from great wealth to bankruptcy, saw all the comings and goings of his life, and he was the man that I rang. I was in my dad's factory working as a packer, and it was difficult for self-worth and humility and ego when I'd been this kid on the bright lights of the West End, and the only person who would employ me at that end of it all was my loving father. And I broke down, and the chap I worked with, his name was Chris. You've got to remember, 33 years ago, there was no rehab telly. There was no Hello magazine. There was no... the nation wasn't really aware so much of 12-step support.
It was definitely a lot more secretive, wasn't it?
Secretive, that's the word.
Definitely a lot more.
So it's almost that there was an element of shame attached to it, wasn't
there? Absolutely. And for me, strangely or not, I thought... and then because Lionel, he arranged it, I'm in rehab, I'm detoxing, he rang my parents, and what was going through my mind then was, well, it'd be all right to tell them I'm an alcoholic, but I don't want my mum to know I'm a dirty drug addict. There was a stigma and there was shame. Anyway, how did I know? Because I had the gift of desperation, and when I got to this rehab called Cloud's House, which is still going, if they'd said to me, David, if you want to go get well, stand on your head in the corner, I would have said, which corner? I got it. I was ready, as opposed to people that I work with, or sometimes in the world of the entertainment industry, where the manager wants to get the artist clean.
Well, let's talk a bit about that, shall we? Because we introduced you a little earlier on as saying that you were the man who helped Ozzy Osbourne with his addiction, very public with it, and he didn't make it very clear that he was suffering. I don't know whether or not suffering is the right word, but he had an addiction problem, and you were the recovery coach who helped him. And I suppose first question is, how did that come about? You know, how is it you get to deal with the lead singer of Black Sabbath, and just how did it all happen?
I'm impressed you knew that.
Thank you.
You don't seem to be the Black Sabbath fan.
Yeah. He is wearing ripped jeans and piercings.
So maybe, yeah.
Okay. I shall keep the piercings to myself.
Right, let's get back to Black Sabbath. Well, look, it goes way, way, way back. So if there's anyone old enough to know about a programme in black and white telly called Crossroads, I was in Crossroads when I was a real little boy, and I used to hang out in a club in Birmingham, and there was Ozzy, there was the two Birmingham bands, Carl Wayne and The Move, and so I kind of met him then, and our paths crossed in one or two dens of iniquity in the 70s, and then I got into my recovery coaching, and I developed a reputation of a pair of safe hands in showbiz, actually. And my name was presented, and we met, and we hit it off. We hit it off because for one of the reasons, Ozzy has got the most fantastic sense of humour. And we're exactly the same age. We had that experience of the 60s. We just got on really well, but I think it was an understanding, and I think it was a trust. That's what started it. And as I said, I didn't want anyone's fame.
You didn't want anything.
You know, I respected it. It was huge, and I'd never been a heavy metal fan. So that, I think that he felt comfortable, I felt comfortable, and the family were terrific, all terrific. Everyone was very kind to me. Sharon was very kind. Sharon was actually a stage school kid like I was. I was at somewhere called Ada Foster's, and Sharon was at Corona, and not many people know that Sharon was in Babes in the Wood, one of the Babes in the Wood at the London Palladium, probably with Charlie Drake and Sid James. So we had that unity of being stage school kids. So we had a common bond, and the children were all sensitive people, and Jack actually would come and do talks to me because all this work I was combining with my NHS work. And I think the fact that on a Monday I could be working with street addicts in Paddington, and on a Tuesday I could be on a private jet working with an artist performing in front of 100,000 people, and then it kept my feet on the ground.
What were the commonalities between someone on the street versus the artist? Because I'm guessing there had to be similarities.
The similarities
are to work with them.
They say recovery is an inside job, and the similarities is that the loneliness and the hopelessness and the desperation can be just the same whether you've got a pavement for a home or you're staying in a suite in the Ritz. The loneliness, because that's the myth, is people, and I had it as well. Oh, you've got such a fabulous life. Look at it. You've got the wealth, the riches, the cars, the this, that, and the other. You must be happy. So I think it was the loneliness, and I have worked with other artists, one who I can think of that I toured the world with, and I watched this artist come off stage to a loving, huge audience, and we rushed off, got into the hotel, police escorts, all that kind of stuff, up through the catering entrance, the service lift, and into this suite, and we just sat basically in the dark, and the artist was in a black depression, and we just had some quiet meditation. So that's not, a rock and roll lifestyle. But the other thing that I do when I'm on the road with these artists, I will take them to the support groups, wherever we are, and whatever nationality. I've taken artists to support groups from Australia to New Zealand to Abu Dhabi to wherever.
I think support groups are really great because it first of all, you don't feel alone anymore.
You can't do it on your own.
You can't do it on your own.
And people ask me, they say, you've not had a drink for 33 years, you can't still be going to support groups. And you know what I say? I don't go for my drinking, I go for my thinking.
Oh, I like that.
So
That's deep.
I like that.
Deep, baby.
That is very deep. Do you know, we've been running a Twitter poll all throughout this show that asks people whether or not, as a nation, do we do enough for those who face addiction? Do we offer them enough help and support? And 87% of our poll says, no, we should be doing more. And you've got your thumbs up there. What are we doing wrong?
Well, the thing that I saw in the NHS, surprise, was the dwindling funding. Because when I was in the system in the 80s, you could get access to residential rehab, possibly. But residential rehab has become too expensive. It's money.
Like with so many things.
It's money, but also there's the schools of thought, I think some politicians were under the impression that if we could keep you out of prison, we'd succeeded in your treatment. If we could reduce crime, we've succeeded in your treatment. Because that's what the essence of all my work has been, is just because I've stopped using, I'm not cured. And what's going to happen? Because of my theatrical background, for years I would do role-playing about job interviews and applications and all those kind of things. People had to learn how to do life with anaesthetic. I had to learn everything, how to have a conversation without a drink or a drug.
Well, that's why I personally think that the support groups are amazing. Because they teach you that other people are going through this, and they can help you relearn these skills that you would have had to have relearned, like just communicating with people. It can be very hard if you're sober, for example, just to have a conversation with someone, because you will feel different, won't you?
And some people are resistant, and I understand that. So when I'm doing a group, I still work for another charity called Action on Addiction, where I do a workshop, 8 workshops a year. And I did a group yesterday, and I could see some people were thinking, yeah, I get that, but I don't want to go into some support group. It must be a cult. And they were worried, and also they make a misconception of that support groups are religious organisations, and actually they're not. They are support group, and I think where the explanation that I need to put out there, that these support groups are spiritual, not religious. Because for some people, they've had not great experiences with their, not all, but some have had challenges as young people with their given religion.
I just want to pick up on your rehab center on Thailand.
Yes.
What would be the advantage of going on a rehabilitation center on Thailand as opposed to going on a UK-based rehabilitation center?
Well, the advantage is, we're talking about the private sector. There's a financial advantage, which money isn't everything, but it's a lot cheaper than going to a center in the UK.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Although the pound and the baht is a bit wobbly at the moment, but it's definitely cheaper. The other thing for some people, because apart from this show, I work with a lot of high net executives, high net worth executives, and for some of those people, they can go on leave. They can have an extended holiday in Thailand, address their addiction incredibly anonymously, and get on with it and come back.
Oh, so and a change is as good as the rest.
Yeah, but it's but it's not just, we're going to lie on a beach. This is work, and as Cam Adair would have explained in the programme, you do the work, but you can disappear. You
take yourself out of a situation that has become synonymous with your issue.
Well, yeah, but wherever you go in the world, your addict goes with you. So it's not like I'm going because that's called. What's that called? It's called a. There's a word for it anyway, where you run. Oh, I'm going to go to the Isle of Skye. I'm not going to find any drugs there. Your addiction is with you. But going to Thailand can be productive because you go away. You go away from the environment. I needed to go away from my environment, but in those days it was just kind of down the road to Somerset. Also the Buddhism, and they have monk talks, and I think that kind of spirituality helps a lot. And the outward, what I would call the outward bound, the exercise stuff that they do in the jungles and with the elephants, that's very therapeutic.
I think exercise is tremendous.
But for young men, what the figures are showing on the studies of young men who there's addiction, but there's what I think technically is known as challenging behaviour, have really had trouble with their families. They learn a discipline, and they learn a responsibility, and they learn to grow up.
Let's pick it apart a little bit more, shall we? Let's just say that there is somebody who comes to you who is addicted to whatever it may be. If it's a substance, maybe addicted to drink, whatever. They come to you asking for your help. How do you go about helping? Is it a case of each case is different? Is there a blanket rule that will help everybody? What do you do? How do you help someone on the path to recovery?
There's no blanket rule. There's no one size fits all. It's down to an assessment. And also, I am not a psychotherapist or a medic. So if someone comes with a straightforward addiction, I can guide them, do a consultation and refer them and give them choices of where they can go if they want to follow the rehab path. Obviously, I recommend that they start getting involved with the support groups. But if there's any hint of mental health issues, I will refer them on to a specialist.
But what would some of those, like, you know, where would you differentiate that sort of thing? Like, what would you say where is that point where you have to differentiate them?
Well, that's just an assessment process where you can identify certain behavioural habits. And also background and upbringing and family histories. There's quite a lot.
One thing I really wanted to know is, and I think maybe this could be one of the benefits of going to somewhere like Thailand for your rehabilitation, is are there certain things that might trigger someone to addiction? So say, for example, you know, I mean, sometimes I walk home from work and I walk past like several hundred pubs.
Yeah.
You know, if I was an alcoholic, I might think I'm on my way home from work. Oh, I'll just pop in there for a bit. You know, and is that kind of another reason why getting to somewhere like Thailand?
Well,
might
it
be
is,
different?
but you do have to come back. But by the time you come back, if you had enough education, and for me, the advice that I give, you're transferring seeing the pub as, oh, it's a hot day and a nice lager with the condensation outside of the glass. Oh no, this has got a skull and crossbones on it.
Yeah,
this is your poison. This is no longer your friend, because the drink and the drugs, they were my friend. They were my spiritual duvet. And then the counsellors took it away, and I was left with David.
And that's what I mean. That's why I think somewhere maybe because you almost just have to relearn yourself. Don't
Absolutely.
You? Yeah.
Are some people easier to re-educate than others?
Yes, because it's at what stage of the pole are they ready? Are they totally ready? Are they thinking about it? Or I might say, try a few support groups, tell me how you get on. Or I might say, well, okay, can you control it?
Would you say that some people simply don't have addictive personalities?
Yes.
Is it possible that someone cannot be addicted to anything?
Well, there are millions of people that don't have issues with drink or drugs. There are people that can have a few drinks on a Friday, maybe get a bit merry, and maybe have a hangover the next day. Whatever it is, if it's not impacting on their lives, it's not impairing their lives or their work or their relationships, because they can say no. And they can say the unknown words to the addict and alcoholic, which are, no thanks, I've had enough.
But what happens to, say, substances that are more addictive? So let's just take, for example, cigarettes, tobacco, and nicotine in particular. Someone starts smoking and they get into a bit of a bad habit of smoking 10, 20 a day, whatever it is. The truth is that nicotine itself is what is addictive, and the cravings for nicotine become too overbearing for someone who does smoke. But they might not necessarily have, as an individual, an addictive personality. It's the substance that they're taking that is addictive. How does that work then? You know, because does it mean then that the substance is to blame, or is it the individual for actually not having the common sense to say, actually, do you know what, I mustn't touch that?
I'm not a specialist in tobacco addiction. But
I'm using that as an example.
Well, no, but it's different. As I say, the smoking cessation. I suppose the similarity is mentally you can know you're smoking all the time and you can get cancer. This part of the brain knows it, but the other part of the brain doesn't go, well, enough is enough, I've got to stop. It's a deep addiction. So I think it's a different category, if that makes sense.
It's a physiological addiction, isn't it?
Thank you very much.
It's something that your body...
It's a body thing. I don't think, for instance, if I was had crippling low self-worth and a history of a really unhappy childhood, that I'd have the cigarettes to fix me.
Yeah, you wouldn't... I know what you mean there.
But because I think, in fact, even more so than heroin, probably. I mean, you can get hooked into tobacco.
Is there a danger in society, though, of people categorising addiction? So let's just say there are some... I mentioned in a little social video that I did before the show started, I was talking about the levels of addiction, the various degrees of addiction. And I was saying about how, again, speaking to you, who obviously is someone who deals with quite hard addictions, so drug and substance abuse. But then there are trivial addictions, or so it seems, people who say addictions that are trivial. So by that I mean potentially addiction to social media, addiction to shopping, all of those sorts of things. They are just as credible to those who are caught up in that addiction, but yet, because they are not as potentially dangerous as substances such as alcohol and drugs and all of that, they won't be taken as seriously. And is there a danger that society is almost neglecting people who have an addiction, but maybe they just don't see it as important?
I'm thinking about Cam Adair. Now, Cam Adair is involved with the Cabins gaming program, and he was an ex-gaming addict. He told me the most alarming stories about young people getting hooked into the gaming and this live gaming, where they're playing games with people over the world. They get so hooked in it, they cannot stop. They just have a bucket under the chair. They won't stop to even go to the loo. They get so hooked in, and socially they start to shrink because they're locked in there. They stay in their rooms. They lose the ability to have verbal contact, and it's a really awful.
I remember a story that Cameron, and it's stuck with me because of how heavy it was. He was saying that when he was in the depths of the gaming addiction, he'd say he would leave his house to go to school. He would wait for his parents to leave the house, and then he would sneak back in through the window, and he would stay there all day long.
He said he didn't even. Sometimes he didn't even wait for them to go. He used to just literally sneak him back through the window. But at least, just had a hold.
At least people are talking about it, and at least now this is interesting, where the government put pressure a little bit. The alcohol industry listened a little bit because we have the drink awareness campaign. The gambling industry have just been sort of pressurized into increasing I don't know what the figures are, but they were giving X million, now they're going to give 30 times more million for gambling addicts. Well, we haven't got time to talk about the pharmaceutical industry or legalisation of drugs, but that's another show.
But it's funny you should say that. Just last night I saw a Gambling Aware advert, which I thought was really, really good, which I haven't seen one before, and it was literally just it was a guy on the sofa. He looked like it was very late at night, and it was just someone saying, look, I think it's time to go to bed. I think just that simple thing of like, maybe it's a bit late, maybe you should stop gambling, maybe you should just go to bed, sort of thing.
And the advertising, the way it's advertised. I mean, I worked with Ray Winston on something called Robin of Sherwood like a million years ago, and he's great. But it's that sort of almost like, come on.
Yeah, come on.
Get on it. What's happening next? How much are you going to win?
Yeah.
Very seductive.
You know what, you pass it by there, but actually I think it's a really interesting point. Does legalising drugs cure the problem?
Well,
I know that we don't have a lot of time, but I think it's important, though. If we were to legalise it, would that, quote, cure the problem?
We don't have a lot of time.
I don't know, but I was reading this yesterday about some reports, and my concern is what young people are smoking is called skunk. It's not the hash and stuff I smoked in the 60s, but the brain damage that they're getting from that particular strain of drugs, it will cripple them for life. If it was legalised and marijuana was controlled and grown under the right conditions, that might help. But it's a big subject, and I'd be doing a great injustice to talk about that in any detail.
Well, then in that case, that's a perfect excuse to ask you to come back and see us and to talk about it another time.
I'll check my diary.
Excellent. We shall make sure we do get you back in again.
One quick thing I wanted to ask. Do you feel like because you have suffered with addiction, do you feel like that's why people maybe feel like they can work with you because they know that you're going through similar things? Like, say, for example, if I was to be an addiction coach, I haven't really suffered with many addictions. I like to pretend I'm addicted to chocolate, but I'm probably not. But do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because I haven't kind of gone through it. Someone might look at me and be like, oh, well, you don't know. But whereas you can say, like, well, I do know what you're going through.
Certainly my experience, I look back and I get it. The National Health, why the addicts, I think they were able, basically they could say to me, you mean you've been where I've been?
And you could say, say yes.
And it's described as a therapeutic addict. The therapeutic. It's one addict sharing their experience with another is without parallel. The therapeutic process of one addict sharing their experience with another is without parallel.
And one would assume it's a reassurance. It's saying, look, I've come through it, so can you.
And if you can do it, it's hope. It's giving hope.
Now, speaking of giving hope, one thing that we do here at Men's Radio Station, we ask our guests to give their top 3 tips in life. And we always put people on the spot. We never warn them we're going to do this. And it's primarily because it normally gives the best answers. We don't want you to overthink it. But what would you say are the top 3 things that come to your mind straight away for someone listening out there to the key to a good life?
Okay. Well, the specialist subject is alcohol and drugs, and what I could say is alcohol costing you more than money.
Wow. Okay. Is alcohol costing you more than money? Okay.
More?
We normally say top 3.
Okay, I could say if you go to vimeo.com, I put my name in, there's a chat. I call it a fireside chat, but I've made 2 short films. One is based on that, how, you're thinking about stopping, and I think at the end of it, if you're looking at this, why are you looking at this? And there's also, you never have to be alone. There's always someone out there who will understand you. But be brave, take risks, don't keep it to yourself. And it can get better.
Well, there you go. What more do you possibly need than that?
3. So
it's certainly more than 3. No, whatever it is, amazing. Thank you very much indeed. Some very wise words there, courtesy of our very special guest, David Charkham, actor and recovery coach. David, you've already said very kindly that you will come back again and see us. We are going to make sure that is the case because, frankly, we could easily talk to you for another hour. Thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us here on Men's Radio Station. I hope that in Russ's absence that the conversation has been justified.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
Okay, well, that is nearly all we have time for today's programme. Unbelievably enough, 3 hours has utterly darted by. Just before we go, though, we cannot possibly neglect to mention that our very own Dennis is about to abandon us for a month. You're disappearing off back to the Philippines for a whole month, and we're all incredibly jealous, but we do wish you a very nice time.
Thank you.
And you have to promise us that you will come back when you come back.
Yeah, with some dried mangoes.
What? Sun-dried mangoes. Fantastic. We look forward to the sun-dried mangoes as well. But as ever, Men's Radio Station is where we really talk. We do always insist that you recognise this as being a first port of call. Very interestingly now that David was just saying how you are not alone, and that's the way we like to look at Men's Radio Station, is that it is a place to talk, to chat, to vent, and to air your concerns. And the conversation does not stop here on a Sunday. We have a nice full schedule of programmes now that are live throughout the week. So please do go to mensradiostation.com. You'll find details of everything that occurs here on the station and the programmes that you can interact with. You'll be delighted to learn that Mr. Kane is back here in the hot seat next week. I'll probably be sitting alongside him, but all the same, he will be back. In fact, actually, no, I don't think I am here next week. Make note, I'm not here next week.
You're not here next week?
I'm not here next week. I haven't told you this. I've told you this now.
Breaking news, live on air.
This is a little bit like a Cilla Black moment when she stood down from Blind Date. She did it live on air without telling the producers. I'm not here next week, but indeed Mr. Kane will be, so do very much hope that you will join him for that. Thank you very much goes to all of our amazing guests. We had John Paul Davis, we also had Jonathan Prince, and of course most recently David Charkham. Thank you very much to the team. Thank you very much to the wonderful Lady B, the goddess of the green room, looking after us all beautifully. Thank you very much to Dennis Relojo-Howell, Mr. Social Media. We have to thank our able producer, pressing all the buttons, setting up all the guests and doing various marvellous things, James Blake. Thank you very much indeed. From me, Phil Dave, have yourself an amazing week, and we'll see you very soon here on Men's Radio Station.